Welcome back to Myth Vision Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Lambert, and we're going to be discussing Zionism, Christian Zionism, and some of the recent hot topics that have been going on. There's been debates about this. We'll probably play a few clips to show people from the horse's mouth some nonsense, okay? Terrible arguments. And I am not alone today. I am joined by none other than Andrew Whyte. Welcome back to Myth Vision, my friend. Andrew.
Thank you so much. It doesn't seem that long ago, so it's really nice. From the UK. Yeah.
I think there might be a slight delay. Once we hit the live button, let me know if there is. Hopefully we're keeping on the same page.
We are. I can hear you fine. Your picture's a bit iffy. Oh, it's back now. So it looks like the devil is really getting against
Satan
us. Really.
Always trying to do this. No, let me just for our audience, huh?
No, I said get thee behind me, Satan. Yeah.
Absolutely. So real quick, Zionism, and tell me if you like this definition. A 19th century Jewish political movement formally launched at the First Zionist Congress in Basel in 1897 under Theodor Herzl, advocated for the establishment of a Jewish national homeland in Palestine. Zionism is a political project. It can be religious or secular, left-wing or right-wing. It is not by itself a religious doctrine.
Yeah, no, that was what I was as an evangelical teenager. That is exactly what I was brought up with to be honest with you, for us, it was a doctrine.
Right.
So it was the only doctrine. It was the right way to understand the Bible. As you know, in all doctrines, someone says it's the right view and everyone else is in error. So that was the view, and that was very well put, except that it was a doctrine to us. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. So that was just Zionism.
Mm-hmm.
Christian Zionism, tell me if you agree with this definition. The theological belief that the Jewish people's return to the land of Israel, the modern state of Israel, the city of Jerusalem, the rebuilding of the temple, and Middle East conflict are tied to biblical prophecy and to God's plan for the end of history. Christian Zionism is a specific theological position. Not every Christian who supports the modern state of Israel politically is a Christian Zionist. Christians can support Israel for many reasons: historical, ethical, geopolitical, in response to the Holocaust, without believing that Israel's existence is required for Jesus to return home or to return. The distinction matters. Christian Zionism in its modern dispensationalist form predates Jewish political Zionism by several years. William Blackstone's 1891 memorial preceded Herzl's first Zionist Congress by 6 years.
Yeah, so Christian Zionism. Yeah, so for us, the doctrine was, of course, Christian Zionism, but we kind of thought, in fact, that was the only kind of Zionism because, it wasn't the idea that the Jewish view was different, but it is actually quite different, and Herzl came along later. The key point here is that Christian Zionism was before. Matter of fact, there were seeds of it in Luther's time, sort of 16th century, and it was, not necessarily returning to the land. The very primitive form of Christian Zionism in the 16th century was actually a fullness of Jewish people coming into the church, not so much the land. That was really interesting, or at least people can argue that. And then in the 19th century, it really kicked off to Christian Zionism was a return to the actual land. And some of that had a lot of influence from British evangelicals to the actual state of Israel today. But also back into the 18th century, the 19th century, Herzl, there was a Jewish form of it, but its seeds was actually also not necessarily a return to the land of Israel. It was we need a place. Now, I know it got called Zionism, but it was interesting that some people were speculating I wonder if it could be like Argentina. There was apparently it was mooted that maybe in the United States there could be a place, without anybody that's there in certain parts, and that could be our land. So there was a sort of a hope for a land that didn't necessarily mean Israel, the Palestinian original place. But then I think once the ball got rolling with both Christian Zionism and standard Zionism, it was to the ancestral land, and so that sort of dominated everything. But it is interesting to find little seeds of, I wonder if we could have them have a state here, because a lot of it was way after Herzl and all of everything else for Zionism. After with the Holocaust and a lot of people turning their backs on taking in Jewish people, it was almost like, we'll give them Palestine, and the British had a lot to do with this, with the Balfour Declaration, which really started the seeds of the complicated, you could say, mess that's now the case. Was all around that point. But certainly before that, it had already been, there's a return to the land, and the Christian backing and the Christian evangelical backing under a form of Christianity called dispensationalism. That was the one through Darby, John Nelson Darby, the Scofield Bible. This was all before the State of Israel, had a lot to do with encouraging, with the prophetic idea that the Bible is predicting the return. You go back to the Bible promises about the land, and it's all picked up and applied to the 20th century. The 19th century as well as the 20th century, all picked up and applied to this period. And so when it happened, when the State of Israel actually happened, you can see that it's probably, for some people, the biggest fulfillment of prophecy that you could ever imagine. It's like a physical reality. It's not just like in the heavenlies. It's actually like, oh my gosh, the Bible is literally speaking about a return, not just a spiritual church or something. And so when I was a teenager in the church, this was one of the biggest proofs of the Bible's prophetic veracity, was in fact the modern State of Israel. No, I don't think that was in your strand, that the modern State of Israel was in fact one of the biggest testimonies to the Bible's veracity.
It was because I was in different strands. So there's different kinds of Christians who have different views on this, as you know. Right. But I participated in different ones. Yeah. The first house church I was part of was a non-denominational evangelical charismatic group that was in line with, the Benny Hinn miracle kind of spirit move kind of movement. And this church, though, was we would practice Jewish holidays, celebrate them, and, be full-blown Jesus freaks. And we would have certain times of the year that were Jewish celebrations that we did. And she was very much obviously pro-Israel. And I mean, as a state, as God's chosen people, the whole nine. Later, when I got more theologically developed in my Christianity, when I started learning about amillennialism and postmillennialism, became reformed, all of those things, that's when my view of this shifted. It began to change. So like postmillennialism, for those who don't know, it's the idea that the world is gradually transformed and Christianized through the spread of the gospel, and Jesus returns at the end of an extended period of peace and righteousness. It was dominated among 19th century American Protestants, mostly faded after World War I, shattered Western progressive optimism, especially once you see World War II hit. They're going, oh, well, shit's not getting better, I guess. We thought it was, and more casualties in World War II than in all of, any war in history. That shatters post-millennialist optimism there, right? Amillennialist is the 1,000 years, and Revelation is symbolic, not a literal future earthly return. The kingdom of God is already inaugurated, etc. Preterism, the Latin word preter, which means past, and this is a view that there's some fulfilled prophecies from the past. They have no significance for the future in terms of their fulfillment. And so there are different theological, partial, and there's full preterist. There's also Christian restorationism. There's Christian non-Zionist. anti-Zionism, where, for example, the Christians who reject Christian Zionism on theological grounds, often arguing that the Old Testament land promises are fulfilled in Christ and universalized in the church, or that the prophetic framework of Christian Zionism is bad biblical interpretation, or that ethics of justice and human dignity should govern political support for any nation, regardless of biblical claims. And there's several scholars you can mention that are in that field that are Christian theologians. So I just figured I'd lay out a few examples, but I was in that God's chosen people are Israel. These are a tribe of people, you could say an ethnic group. And when I became more reformed over time, like, dude, I was just trying to conform to what I thought the Bible was saying and just kept changing my mind about things. Anyway, that was enough on me.
Well, yeah, I went from one church which was dispensational, or at least, so to say, the church wasn't officially dispensational, but prominent people in the church were. So I was very much imbibed with that dispensational view, that the millennium was, in fact, it doesn't say much in Revelation about what happens in the millennium. So dispensationalists fill it up like a glass of all kinds of things in the Old Testament. And so, and that very literalistic geopolitical future, which is honestly actually in the Old Testament, matter of fact, it goes even beyond that. It talks about in Ezekiel, future temple sacrifices going on, presumably. It doesn't even say 1,000 years. It just seems to be the picture of the future is this temple with sacrifices. It talks about the priests, I think the Levite priests being in this new kingdom forever. And that's, so the whole future predictions from within the Old Testament seem to be earthly, political, priests, sacrifices. And that seems to be completely reinterpreted by New Testament authors. So I think I know why it's happened. It's because some Christians are saying, you can't just abandon that literalistic future of the Old Testament. So what they do, or what I found they did, was keep it for the millennium. So the Israel, in a sense, chugs off the scene in AD 70. And then we have this church period, which isn't in the Old Testament. That's dispensationalism. So the Old Testament doesn't see the church period. And then what happens is that as soon as the rapture happens, the train of Israel comes chugging back on into the scene again, and we pick up and we carry on in the millennium. This fulfills the literalistic picture in the Old Testament. Even the one in Isaiah, when it says Isaiah's new heavens and the new earth actually doesn't have immortality, as we talked about last time on that subject. It actually has people living to a very old age. Yeah, it has death still. But it's obviously like the lion, the wolf will lie down with the lamb. There's this peaceful thing, but there's a temple and sacrifices and Jerusalem, and there's no wars, but it's still mortality. So people have gone, that must be the millennium. So again, you pick that up and you throw it into the 1,000 years of Revelation, and the Jewish situation has to happen. And therefore, now this is going to, you will know this, Derek, but I mean, I was brought up with the dispensationalist thing to say that the temple that Jesus said was coming down isn't the AD 70 temple. It's the new temple that's going to be built. That will come down in the tribulation. It's the tribulation temple. Yeah. And then there's going to be a fourth temple, which is the one in Ezekiel that's built for the millennium. So I don't know. And I know you're very, very knowledgeable on the temple situation, but did you come across that view that there's a third and a fourth?
I didn't know there was a fourth. I've known people they've been wanting to build a third.
It's the idea that if Jesus, of course, the Jewish some Jewish sects want to build a third, and that there's talk of that even now, but it's only a small kind of almost isolated group, it seems. I think the majority, but when you get to Matthew and Luke, and it says, some standing here will not taste death. And sorry, not that one. When will these things happen? About the stones, not one stone here will be left. That because immediately the tribulation happens afterwards, and the Son of Man comes. This has to be the future, and therefore a future temple. In other words, it's not there now, and if it's going to come down, the inference is it's got to be built.
That's because they're forcing.
And when I read Matthew and Luke and Mark, and
sorry, there was a pause there for a second,
Yeah.
and then I started talking. I was going to say that's because they're still needing those prophecies to be future. They're still expecting them to be in their future rather than this is actually discussing the Roman Jewish war in 70. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why the view on the extreme version had Rome coming back into the scene again, like ancient Rome, and then, or ancient Babylon, or everything has to be reimagined in order to have the prophecy take place for our future. And so when I was in my 20s, I read the Gospels again on it, and I thought, it sounds like Jesus is clearly talking about the temple that they were looking at then, not a future one. And I thought it's actually almost impossible to see the temple as not. So some people did say, yeah, okay, the AD 70 prefigured the tribulation that was going to come, but it can't be immediately. So you then get into partial preterism and all that sort of stuff, as you know. But the interesting thing was that the fourth temple was going to come down, and then a fourth temple was going to be built, and that's the one in Ezekiel. I don't know if you've ever thought about the whole structure in Ezekiel, which is like massive, and it's got temple sacrifices going on, and this is meant to be the picture of the future. And so the millennial dispensationalists put that in the millennium, and then you've got people that are raptured, and they come and they're the church, and they come and live with people who are still dying in the millennium. And so you've got these immortal people with mortal people. I mean, it was all in the theology that we believed. And I just thought it was crazy. I thought it was absolutely crazy, you know. And then you had so hang around. So Jesus was our one sacrifice, and Hebrews seems to think that that's it. And now you're saying temple sacrifices are going to come again. And then I was told, yes, but they're just meant to be not effective. They're meant to be a memorial. This is what we used to do to talk about Jesus coming in the future. Now we do it in the millennium because Jesus came in the past. It's just all symbolic, you know. You know, in the end, I just thought, this is what I'm living in, crazy land, a madhouse, you know, and it's not actually the evangelicalism. I then went to a church which spiritualized it, or said that the fulfillment was in the church. There's no land promises. All the promises are fulfilled in Jesus. And I came to accept that and realized that some of the New Testament authors really did speak like that. They really did seem to lift out a midrashic or pesher view of the text. And you didn't have to take the details of Jesus coming back to the Mount of Olives and it's splitting in two. That I was taught that as well, that Jesus would come back to the Mount of Olives. It will split in two, like one Old Testament says, and then living waters will rush through it. This was all literal, physically in Jerusalem, you know. And I came to see, and so most of my life I didn't hold the dispensational. I'm just going right back to the primitive roots of that, what I was taught. And so en route to almost full preterism, like 20 years, 30 years later.
Yeah. I love figuring out more about cognitive dissonance, because there seems to be two paths people take when prophecy fails. And that is, they extend the timeline and expect a future prophecy to take place, or they spiritualize it. And this idea that they made all of these Old Testament prophecies actually fulfilled in some Pesher-like spiritualized form, it doesn't mean it literally. It completely dissolves the Old Testament Hebrew Bible from its actual meaning. I mean, it takes it all away when you actually make Jesus fulfill these things, because nothing actually gets fulfilled as far as its original context. But I have a few super chats. We want to get these super chats as we go along, but I also want to play a clip. There was a recent debate, and I'll show my screen in just a moment here, but real quick, let's hit these super chats. Thank you so much for the super chat. IDF kills children. We need to ban Metzitza B-Pay. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Direct oral suction and save the infants. Do you understand this?
Save the infants.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
To ban, we need to ban. I'm going to see that it's sort of some kind of way of talking about saving the fact that so many infants and children were killed in Gaza, I presume.
Yeah.
Which is a more modern political question. But there is a link, of course. We can't avoid the fact that when I was a dispensationalist, I just inherited the view that Israel today was the key. It's the key to prophecy, the key. And once you get rid of modern Israel as the key to prophecy, you can go to a place where like you did, which it isn't the key to prophecy. It's Jesus is, and anything in him, in a metaphorical sense.
But I agree with the sentiment in terms of the children,
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do understand what's being said roughly, but I'm not sure how to comment on it.
Thank you for the super chat. Bakken, thank you for the super chat. Good to see you here, Bakken. The Birth of a Nation, late 19th century Klan Night Glory film, inspired the colonizer project. Modern Zionism is born of American Confederacy, racial national dominion birthed in U.S. First Congress. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, just like everything in theology and denominations and also just secular politics, everything often has a complex stream of different influences. And so there's definitely a secular influences to modern Zionism, or the project, or the settler colonial project, as some people like to call it, in one way. Some people say that. But the religious aspect is what we're really talking about, that religious influence from Christians before Jewish Zionism within itself, because that could have been very much a religious Jewish view of the future, but it could have been a secular Jewish view. A lot of Jewish people are secular, and a lot of the modern state of Israel people now are actually atheists, and so they have a Zionism which doesn't include anything to do with the Bible. And then there will be Orthodox Jews that see the same as Christians. They kind of agree. There are some fundamental aspects that we'll talk about later where there would be a massive fundamental difference between Christian theological future for Israel and a religious Jewish view of Israel for the future, including, by the way, another thing to mention a bit later, that there is a whole massive group of Jewish people that don't agree with the modern state of Israel right now, that it's wrong, it's ungodly, and it's not of God. But they do believe the land will be theirs when the Messiah comes, the actual Messiah, not Jesus, of course. And so I've listened to some of those people. So they're Zionists, but they're not. This one is a fake Zionist. This is not of God. The real one will be a peaceful one when Jesus comes back, in their view, and they will be given the land. How that will be peaceful in this real world, I don't know. But it is interesting. There's Jewish splits over this. Not every Jew is pro the current political state of Israel.
Yeah. So I've never heard this argument. I have heard about political kind of, let's say, apocalyptic, eschatological fervor that led toward Christians wanting to be on board with the project of getting Jews from all over the world into the land of Israel as a way of bringing Christ back to cause the Lord to return in their minds. But I just screenshot this and just ran it through. I don't know if this is accurate or not. I threw it in ChatGPT just to say, is this accurate, to have it do some thinking. This is what ChatGPT said.
Yeah.
No, as written, it is not accurate. It mixes a few real things with a major chronological and historical mistake. The biggest problem, The Birth of a Nation came out in 1915, not the late 19th century, 1800s. It glorified the Ku Klux Klan and helped inspire the Klan's 20th century revival, but it could not have inspired modern Zionism's founding because organized political Zionism was already underway before the film existed. Modern political Zionism is usually traced to Theodor Herzl, especially in the Jewish state in 1896, and the first Zionist Congress in Basel in 1897. Britannica describes Zionism as a Jewish nationalist movement that originated in Eastern and Central Europe in the latter part of the 19th century, with Herzl central to its political form. The Confederacy also does not fit the chronology or geography of the claim. The Confederate States existed in 1861 to 1865, decades before Herzl's political Zionism and half a century before the birth of a nation. It was a pro-slavery cessationist state in the American South, not the birthplace of modern Zionism. A more accurate critical version would be something like this. Modern Zionism emerged in the late 19th century Europe as a Jewish nationalist movement responding to anti-Semitism, failed emancipation, pogroms, and broader European nationalist currents. It can be criticized as having settler colonial dimensions in Palestine, but it was not born from the American Confederacy, and it was not inspired by the birth of a nation, which appeared decades later. So maybe later, something like that may have found inspiration from the already moving, because we know Americans were starting to move in that direction in the early 1900s, already in support of this idea of getting Jews to the homeland and stuff like that. So I don't know enough about the geopolitical side of these things in order to know exactly what happened, but I just figure I'd run it through and see what ChatGPT had to say about it. I don't know. And ChatGPT could be wrong a lot. So you never know what the facts are with that. Oh, Bakken.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Use a different platform, yeah.
Yeah, you really have to go
fine.
check the sources, the primary sources. So I'm just telling you what it said. Bakken's back
That's
again.
right.
Thank you, Bakken.
Yeah.
Bakken says the Klan did view themselves as Christians. They still do today. They saw themselves as the divine race of God. Zionism meant their future dominance. So I don't know enough about the Klan's position in Zionism and the geopolitical situation of getting Jews to Israel. From my understanding, they weren't fans of Jews. They also weren't fans of other people, groups, and they still aren't. And I don't know. I know that they do see themselves as important. They like to read some of the much more xenophobic material that we find within the Hebrew Bible, which talks about staying with your own kind and not mixing seed and all that kind of stuff, or wandering for those. What does it describe the women as? They're gonna lead you astray to foreign false gods and stuff like that. So they're like reading a lot of this Old Testament material and saying today this applies to them.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the things though that's really at odds with the Bible's view of even an earthly future for Israel, and even if you were to interpret it as back in the land, and remember, you've got this 2,000-year disparate gap which didn't even seem to be envisioned in the Old Testament. You know what I mean? It was meant to be happening. Probably the book of Daniel is really looking at 2nd century BC fulfillment. You know, that the in the Greek period was meant to be the return, the proper visual return to the land, as Daniel seems to be. And that, I think that's obviously failed. And then Revelation is picking it up all again, reinterpreting it, reconfiguring it, and it's meant to be late 1st century, and that failed. Then we've got 2,000 years of history, and then we've got the situation now, which is so polarized, which is why some Jews don't think the modern state of Israel now is of God, because the picture of Israel coming back to the land is that they come to God in repentance, and they're blessed, that there's no wars anymore. It's a peaceful sort of situation in the world. I mean, but there is this prior tribulation period, or that becomes bigged up by dispensationalists, but there is this sort of thing of Jacob's trouble, and there is a sort of a purging going on. So there is something that's happening prior to that, but the conclusion is this very peaceful state. So what people have to do now is try and say, well, this whole period since 1948, or even the beginning of the 20th century, when things started to mix and be problematic, all of this is this Jacob's trouble in I think it's Zechariah. And it's a sort of a purging, but it's all to do with people believing and following in Yahweh. And within the Jewish sense, within the Christian sense, they're meant to be believing and following and believing finally in Jesus, accepting Jesus as the Messiah. And then they go into the land. Not go into it. Then they are blessed in the land. It's almost impossible to see the modern state of Israel as largely followers of Yahweh. You know, the Orthodox Jews, yes, they are, and or they would believe they are, but and some of them think the modern state now is God's work, but there are other Orthodox Jews that don't, because it's not like the vision of the Old Testament is picturing, and so it gets complicated because there are these judgment passages, and so the biggest problem with dispensationalist future is that some people have called the dispensationalist view that I held once as a Christian as a teenager was anti-Semitic, because it cannot avoid in its theology 2/3 of the people going back will be killed in this tribulation under the Antichrist. Then Jesus comes back. The purification of 1/3 that's left are the ones to be blessed. So it is diametrically opposed to any Jewish view that thinks going back to the land is of God right now, or in the future. It hasn't got 2/3 being killed in their view, in my understanding of it anyway. But the Christian view is that. And so I was brought up and taught that the tribulation was going to be an awful time for the world, but particularly for Jewish people in the land. And so really that leads some people to say, well, we need to actually say, don't go to Israel if you want to be saved, as in saved from being killed in this tribulation, because you might be one of the 2/3 that are slaughtered in this awful time in Israel. And so because that's Matthew 24, that's the tribulation, if you see what I mean. That's the idea that this is future. You're going up through it, and only 1/3 will come through like a purging fire. And so so what would you say to that? I mean, I'm trying to link it to what this person said, but it's complicated with Christian and Jewish views that often differ as well.
Yeah. I mean, look, the way you just described that, Bakken, thank you for that super chat. The way you did I answer that super chat, by the way? I think I did. Yeah. Clan definitely does. And yes, I did answer that one. We'll get to the next one in just a second. Yeah. So your point is, what a horrific idea. I mean, imagine your belief system taught you that you need to go in order to have everything wrap up. You're an agent that can cause, by the way, things to wrap up. It's your goal to make sure things wrap up. But you're told that, hey, listen, a good 70% of the people are going to burn in hell. Now, the end can't happen unless you tell them, but 70% of the people you do tell about Jesus are going to end up burning in hell. Just hypothetical scenario here. But 30% of them will go to heaven. But you're playing a pivotal role on who's going to hell and who's going to go to heaven. You'd almost want to hand that job to someone else. Say, listen, all right, someone else do this. I'm not going around, and I don't want to be the instrument from which that happens. But part of the Zionist propaganda you were being taught was that, listen, you need to get Jews to the homeland. We back this whole project so that the Antichrist can come and then kill 2/3 of them. Like, what kind of that brings up the ethical trolley kind of example, where you have a train that's going to run over one person, or you can pull the switch and it runs over 4 or 5 or something. Oh, no, you don't press anything and it kills 5 people. If you do press
I think there's like 5 people that can be saved. Yeah. That's the very famous philosophical dilemma, isn't it? There's 5 people on a train track that will be killed, but you can delay it onto this other track if you kill this one person. So you go, okay, I'll delay it to the one person. Then they say the one person is your brother. And that changes it again. You kill your brother for the 5 people, and so these moral dilemmas are hard, aren't they? And it's okay, back to the 5 people again. And then it's around that kind of idea, that dilemma. So I see what you mean.
What do you do?
And 2/3 killed, and not, you said about going to hell or whatever, or the traditional hell, but slaughtered in the first place is bad enough. And then if they don't accept Jesus in the classic evangelical sense, then they're going, they've got hell and judgment coming their way on top of being killed in Israel. That's why some people say that view is anti-Semitic, even though they are the ones giving money sometimes to support the modern state, because it supports. It's awful, really, because it's like a theological slaughter camp with a gambling board on which will you be in the 2/3 that don't make it or the 1/3 that does? Okay, that's a bit of a risky gamble. Do you know what I mean?
So they do it anyway.
The advice would be get them out of Israel, and they do it, and yet you've got to go back, because it fills the blueprint of how they are understanding the Old Testament and the New Testament and the millennium. And so it's almost disingenuous to say, I love you, my brother, a Jewish person. I know you don't believe Jesus is the Messiah, but we support you going to Israel, and then go, oh, but of course you might not come back. You might not live through it. Is awful theology if it's the future of the real world we're talking about. So I think some Jewish people who know of this theology, they will probably take the money and laugh at the theology. So that's not well, we don't think that's going to happen to us.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, like if someone's funding
we want to be there to be protected. The whole point was to be protected.
Exactly. Like if someone decided they're going to fund
the whole
me,
point was
I'd
to
be
go
happy.
to Israel.
Oh, we've got a delay. Sorry.
We got what? Sorry.
We have a delay. Clearly, as soon as you pause, I begin, and then you start, and then you know what I mean?
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, if I was just saying the whole thing was about the whole Zionist thing and saying its positive sense, rather than seeing it necessarily as a settler-only colonial project, but just say the ideal of it. It was meant to be a protection of Jewish people from the pogroms and the anti-Semitism in Europe and all the rest of it, and awful stuff that's happened in history. You go to this place for protection, and then you've got these Christians backing you who have a theology that ultimately isn't protection. It's refinement to accept Jesus as the Messiah. So not only is it kind of anti-Judaism, or you can't stay in your current Judaism because salvation doesn't come that way. It's actually almost an insult to the Jewish view of it. And so it's so complicated, so complicated.
Yeah. Bakken, thank you so much for the super chat. The backing of Confederate Christianity and evangelicalism has had government investment and used groups like SIL to spread colonizing. Bakken, thank you so much. I did not know that, and there's a lot I have to learn. I figure before we get to our next super chat here, Harper Rue is encouraging everyone to stop watching us. I hope everyone stops watching. You clowns are the bad people. We're bad for trying to point out horrific ideas and belief systems, and also trying to say, we're not fans of what's happening today. We're not. We want peace. We want people to stop killing kids. We don't want that. But the bad people are the ones talking right now. Clearly the ones who are hoping and encouraging people to find a better way to view the world, something more humanistic, something that's going to try and encompass all peoples and not specific over others. I think that's a good ethical outlook to have, and I've changed my mind on a lot of things in this topic over the past few years. That doesn't mean my skin doesn't crawl when bad things happen to people of any group. But it's real quagmire trying to navigate this topic, for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult if you are trying to talk with people about perhaps injustices done to one group, and then that itself, if you're talking about one group of injustices done to them, whoever that might be, that itself is offensive to someone else. You know what I mean? That's kind of, it's strange to me. If you point out the plight of any group, and then someone else comes along and goes, "You're idiots," because it almost implies there's only certain groups to be privileged of support, and other groups can just go by the wayside in life. And so the marginalized, I mean, even in a Christian view, the Good Samaritan story is about the marginalized groups that were in that story being pointed out by Jesus to be looked after and cared for, wider than the social structures of the day, So I do find it hard when somebody says, so if you talk about just other groups, like, if just to put it in a way that isn't about Israel or Palestine or anything like that, and just say, I have a lot of sympathy for the Native Americans and how they were treated in the formation of the states, and someone goes, "Heretic, we want you, get rid of you people from the world for saying such a thing," just because you're supporting now in hindsight problems that were done to the Native Americans, or any group. And so it's just, to me, that's kind of weird, if you can't speak out about injustice, and speaking out about injustice offends somebody, it's like, what kind of world are we living in? If something is truly unjust, and say, "Oh, well, you can't be unjust to Native Americans. They deserved it. They're not they weren't as good as the people that were coming to the United States. And it's like, I just don't understand that. Whenever there's injustice acknowledged, I think it's a good thing. If recompenses are made, so yeah.
I mean, we're all gonna we all make mistakes, all humans, and clearly there's going to be problems. But figuring out how to navigate those and be able to communicate in a way that shows less hate, I think, is the goal. Especially when you have it anchored in ancient literature, that is another difficult problem, and that problem arises not only in the Jewish sacred literature, but it also arises in Christian literature. In many cases, you can find positive stuff like you can negative. But also in Islamic literature. I mean, like all three of the Abrahamic, materials, I can find horrific things that get applied by people in the modern period. We're talking like contemporaneous today that use and weaponize the material to support what they want to do. And in fact, recently we had a funny situation on Piers Morgan. This is off the topic of Zionism, but it's related to the overall, everything's connected like a web. Who's that guy who just like fumbled for 3 minutes? Chat, help me out. Who's the guy who's
yeah. That's Russell Brand.
Russell Brand.
I watched it.
Was he trying to find a scriptural passage that kind of helped him, I don't know, justify and find mercy for his, I can't use the word on YouTube, but his sexual abuse situation with a minor?
Or just life. Yeah. No, I just think it was something that was helping him through his life at this particular point, and he just couldn't find it at all. So most people think that he didn't have one or whatever. Yeah, it's a complicated situation. But yeah, it was an embarrassing thing because I think it was here. So it looks like he thought, I'm going to try and find the one. I mean, it's easy to see that. I don't know. I mean, I think if I was put on the spot for a scripture, I could be fumbling around thinking, I know, where is it? Oh, flip. Oh, you know what I mean? So it's possible, but it did look like it was hugely embarrassing to ask. And yeah, a lot of people have a lot of things about what he's doing. He's become a Christian in relatively recent years. He's become kind of MAGA and Republican when he was hard left when we knew him in England. Right. He's like hard Democrat. So it's like going from Bernie Sanders to Tucker Carlson, in
Tucker's
his views,
changing too. Tucker's beginning to. We don't even know where he's going now.
To be honest, Tucker's speaking out on things that I think never thought he would. It's like, wow.
Right.
Out of all, sometimes there's a Democratic and a Republican meeting in the same area for similar reasons, and it's like, I haven't seen this before. And he's one of them, and it's like, whoa. But certainly in the past, he was like way over on the right. But anyway, that's another subject.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, he does talk about the Israel case situation, by the way. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, we're going to get these knocked out, and then we'll get into a modern debate that happened where this guy absolutely, and he's not the only one. We're going to play a few. I think we got to pause it, though, so we don't get dinged by the YouTube gods that want to try and come after us. But they're pulling completely nonsensical arguments to try and like justify their views of Zionism. So Steve, thank you so much. Is it Sinead? Forgive me if I butcher your last name. Zionism really began with Bar Kokhba. Agree? I mean, if you want to say Zionism is, kind of a Jewish nationalistic political movement that is trying to say, hey, this land is promised by God to our people, and they're going out of their way to do it, you might as well go back to the Hasmoneans. This problem happened prior to Bar Kokhba, but of course, Bar Kokhba would be another nationalist Messiah-type figure who attempted to make the case through weaponry and warfare, and of course, got completely slaughtered. And of course, some of the rabbinic traditions with Akiva and stuff like that come after him. Rabbi Akiva thought that Bar Kokhba was the Messiah. This becomes very difficult to navigate for a lot of the rabbinic literature when you look closely at it, because the guy failed. He clearly gets crushed in this war against Rome. But if you're looking for like a national identity of people who are willing to fight and kill to get the land, I would go back to the Hasmonean Maccabean situation and say, hey, okay, That would be something that you could say nationalistically they're trying to establish a state or their own jurisdiction where no one else is over them and go from there. So I would say go further back to that, in my opinion. Next super chat, Truth Seeker. Thank you so much for that super chat. Is there a way you can get Tim Hogan on here? He says the Knight Templars have the bones of Jesus and his family, and they are going to release them to the world. I've
heard this sort of thing before. Yeah.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
I don't know how to get a hold of him.
Most things aren't new, and so ideas are floating around like this. Yeah. I don't really know what to say to something like that.
Yeah. I'd say have him release.
But I do on the previous. Yeah. Well, look, if you're a truth seeker and you want evidence is the way forward for anything, the clearer the evidence, the clearer everyone sees the evidence, is the best thing for any idea. So I think is the best way. What's the evidence for that? So we need to talk about the current Knights Templars, the evidence for that, then the evidence that they've got the bones, then the evidence that the bones are Jesus. Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah, I'm interested.
Just like finding Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark would be the same thing, which is a recent thing in the news, by the way. So that's why I said that.
It's I've got a video coming out. It's not so recent, actually. These claims have been going on since.
Oh, no, that particular one, that's old. But what I mean recently is that people revive stuff that's 20, 30, 40 years old all the time.
Exactly.
And and it's just a revival of an ancient rock mass. No, it's here. It's the mountains of Ararat. It's not Ararat, and it's not that rock shape. And there was a bit of wood over here. It's been happening for decades, and so you get these people who goes, "We know where Noah's Ark is." No, you're wrong. We know where Noah's Ark is, says another evangelical. We know where it is, and that says a third one. And so you can sit like this and watch it and go, agree amongst yourself before you tell the world. You know what I mean? That's the way I see it. Yeah.
Wild. Yeah. Truth Seeker. Once I see something released, whether I have him on or respond to it, because that's what I typically do when I hear things like, some of that stuff. But then again, you're saying he has the bones of Jesus. Well, that falsifies a lot of the theology that you find within Christian churches that, Jesus is bodily alive somewhere. I just look forward to seeing what this person has and what they're releasing and just see how that goes. Steve, again, thank you, Steve, for the super chat. My understanding is that in Israel, it is illegal to burn the flag of Jordan, but not vice versa. That always gets left out of conversations. Response, I think they're saying re-Israel, so like respond in Israel or reacting to Israel. I'm not sure what they mean by the RE.
I wouldn't be surprised that was true. I wouldn't be surprised because there's some interesting laws over there, like for example, were you aware? Well, you probably would have been of the brand new law where in the current government of Israel, they were celebrating with wine and champagne and badges and emblems or whatever of the new law that you can execute and put to death Palestinian terrorists, but if you had an Israeli terrorist, you don't. It's a segregated law. It's quite unbelievable. I'm just saying about the segregation of the law.
Right.
So one group can be put to death as a terrorist, another one could do the same terrorist action and not because they are of Jewish heritage and they are of Palestinian heritage. So it's almost a law that's saying, well, to me, and a lot of people in England were just shocked at this because of the disparity of the value of the human being, and so and that's the current government, which is the Likud party, and so Ben Kavir and Smotrich was kind of behind celebrating this. I think it was Ben Kavir was in the video that I saw, and there's an idea of a segregated law. There are other laws like housing. So Arab Israelis don't quite have the same rights as Jewish Israelis in the country of housing, ability to buy housing. So that's why the communities of Arab Israelis are sort of packed in their housing, and there's not a lot of room in some of the communities, and then others can just move anywhere they want. And so there's these segregational laws that are embedded in the system. And so once you realize that, something like this could, super chat here, is that it's, again, that's something that wouldn't surprise me when you have a law for one way and not another, you know.
Interesting. Yeah, good. Thanks for the super chat, Steve. I have some stuff that we plan to, you sent it to me, it's your fault. Okay, so if anyone wants to blame anybody, blame Andrew. No, but seriously, go subscribe to Christian Diversity. That's Andrew's YouTube channel. He hasn't been publishing for years, but you could still go subscribe and check him out over there. Christian Diversity. I'll go ahead and paste it in the chat so everybody can find you there. But then you also have, I have in the description your podcast that is active. You're currently
very active. Doubts allowed. Yep.
This guy right here, Rudy Rockman, and I probably butchered his name, but he debates, I think, 20 pro-Palestine debaters, one Israeli versus 20 pro-Palestine, and he makes a claim in this that we have a clip from, we're going to play in just a moment. But if you were curious where this comes from, it's from the Jubilee episode, and the claim is here. We'll get to it in just a moment. But I will have to pause this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Before you start, though, I think this can go back to one of the super chats.
Okay.
We're talking about Bar Koppler and the, is this the beginning of Zionism? This guy is arguing that the beginning of Zionism is actually in one of the sons of Noah. And so talking about you said going back to the sort of Maccabean period, but actually there's obviously all this Old Testament stuff about a return to the land, which people have lifted out to this current thing. But even if you go back and back and back, this guy is doing something I never heard. So what Derek is about to play, in anything that I've known in my background from trying to research subjects like this, or just talking and listening and hearing, this was new. And apparently it's not new. I just hadn't heard about this particular version. I don't think you had, Derek, either.
No, I hadn't. And let me just say this, because now we go back to that. You got me rethinking. If I were to push the envelope as far back as I can in my mind, historically, where they actually attempted to settle, not through, like, because a lot of the dating of this material is up for grabs, and there's so much debate around when exactly. But the return to the land and establishing and all that, I would say the oldest you can go is Persian. Okay, that's probably the best you can get, is that they return. Cyrus allows them to come back to this land and establish their temple and whatnot. That doesn't mean that they may not have had, obviously, this during Babylonian, Assyrian times, but when you get back that far, you're dealing with a different picture. You're not dealing with the 12 tribes. You're not like there's really, all of that stuff seems to be later anachronistic portrayals of what's going on in the land. And so it's very difficult to get through there. So I think it's safe to say the oldest you can go in any form that might match a lot of the religious Zionistic interpretations would be Persian period. I mean, a lot of them were happy being settled in like Elephantine and other areas. They didn't care about living in Jerusalem. So we want to play this, but we want to play this with in mind, Andrew, that we need to pause every 10 seconds or so.
Is it? Really? Okay.
Yeah, just to play it safe, maybe 12. I mean, 15 max, maybe, because Jubilee is pretty known for playing games on YouTube, and they like try to copyright, or at least try to mess up the video that plays their content, unless you play very short clips, and then you have fair use and whatnot. So let's hear what he says, what she says, and then let's talk about this problem that he raises as a debate part. He's using this to win a debate on Zionism. Here we go.
About how you think this is indigenous, your people are indigenous.
Sure. So I love how you brought up the Torah, and so since we're using the Torah, let's go from the beginning. Okay. So you have Noah, who has the ark and has several children. One of those children is called Shem. Shem becomes the father of the Semites, right? All the Semitic peoples are descendants from Shem. Then there's another son called Ham.
So let's pause just to give it a second here. I hope everyone sees this is pretty simple. There are three sons of Noah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, right off the bat, by the way, if you're just anybody like a secular academic or even a maybe I would say even a thinking Christian or anything who knows about historical archaeological study, right off the bat, he's just assumed Noah and the ark was a historical event and real, just perfect assumption. So Noah with the ark. Yeah. Well, he had sons. One of them was Shem. And it's like, you could be saying, Hermione, Harry Potter and Ron, the characters there, and Snape. It's almost, it would be a bit like saying that to someone in 100 years or 200 or 2,000 years or something about Harry Potter, and somebody's going, yeah, I know about the narc. Oh, really? So you think Hermione did this? And there's no question coming in here. For those who think it's historical, let me just say this. I think it's historical, so I'm going to argue this point. But he starts off as if everybody's going to agree that this was a real event, So
exactly.
That's my point. Yeah.
That's a good point. I'm glad you chime in, and please chime in every time. Yeah. Let's do it. Yeah. Let's continue.
Ham has eventually a descendant called Canaan, who's born in Africa. Eventually, the Canaanites descend from Africans who were living at that region. The Canaanites.
So that right there was one of the big fumbles that I noticed. He's trying to say that they weren't really originally from that region, the Levantine region where we see Palestine, that they're really from Africa, the Canaanites. So he's already setting up a way of trying to say the people that were in the land when Abraham shows up, which he butchers that too. We'll get to that in just a second.
Yeah,
but
totally.
He's trying to pretend there were no natives to this region, and the ones that were there that will get listed in Abraham's story were really from Africa. They weren't really actually from this territory, and I don't think that's biblical at all. Like biblical.
No, this is. Yeah. But even in the biblical story, he will actually, I don't think he says where it comes from, but the other video I've got, they do admit where the story comes from, which is 2nd century BC, by the way. But this thing here, yeah. So carry on.
Okay.
Eventually take the land of the descendants of Shem, which are the Hebrews. The descendant of Shem is Ever. The descendants of Ever are the Ivrim, the Hebrews. The Canaanites actually take the land of the Hebrews, which causes the Hebrews to be displaced. That is why Abraham is born in displacement.
Bro, so we got to pause. We have to, because if not, it's going to hurt us.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this for a second, and then we'll keep going.
Abraham is born in displacement because of the people that are in the land where he should have been. Yeah. So it's kind of comical because it doesn't actually come from the Bible, and it's almost like the way it all speaks later with Abraham is just so like not giving a clue about this, that it should be raising a red flag instantly. And I did when I first heard it. I thought, what? Never heard this, and Abraham is in displacement. I think that there's another version of it slightly, which is that just to put it quite simply, that Shem, the 3 sons of Noah, Shem was given the land of Canaan. Is it Shem, Ham, and
Japheth?
And Ham was given, on the descendants of Ham, was given the land of this other place that he mentions, which is Africa. So the argument, I think, from Jubilees, well, we'll come into that later, which is far, far, far later sort of stories about this, is that it seems to me that those that were promised the land that would have been in Africa didn't want to go there, and they stopped and stayed in Canaan, which would be eventually Palestine and Israel, if you like, whatever way you want to use it. But that land strip, they didn't obey the land that was promised to each of the sons. And so what's happening is that then Canaanites are like, it's like when a house is empty and someone goes in, belongs to somebody, but they go in and live there, like squat. So the idea is that the Canaanites are squatting in something that isn't your land, promised to Shem, and of course Semitic people, all Semitic people could descend down that line. But it's building up, as you'll see, to a premise that's very clear when you play the next few clips.
Yep. Here we go.
he's actually the first Zionist. He's the first Jew returning to his ancestral homeland and being able to live there, but doesn't yet have control over the land because the Canaanites still control. Fast forward 2 generations later to the 12 tribes with Joseph, they end up in Egypt.
So should we pause there and like what he just did? Because there's a lot he's doing here. He's going so fast.
Awful lot.
Yeah. So if I may just paint what he just did. He has 3 sons of Noah that he just assumes historically really happened, as if this isn't some later romanticized version of the origin of the human race in a mythological kind of historical.
Exactly. Just get rid of that. You know Noah, you know the ark. Yeah. Well, now I've got you. Let's talk about it.
Right. So now you got Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? Shem is the Semitic peoples, which, by the way, the Canaanites had a Semitic language, DNA. There's so much that goes on in genetics that you could talk about. The Hamites, which would it's trying to say Africa, and then Japheth would be more in your northern Europeanish territories that we see in the upper. And this is just a tripartite kind of way of describing the ancient groups of humans, and from them are various other groups that the Bible goes into that are descendants of those 3 major heads. He's trying to slip in the Hamites. Even though he wants to pretend they're Canaanites, he pretty much says the Canaanites were Hamites in a way. He tries to say, they're from Africa. Then they came to the land, and they end up taking the land, I guess, from the Shemites. He said so much so fast there, but he acts like they aren't supposed to be there, and that this was supposed to already be the land for Abraham, as if there's already an established promise. The land is already theirs, and then Abraham is just supposed to come back and take back his land that was already given to his ancestors. That's pretty much what he's trying to do. He's using this pedigree argument that's absent. You do not get it anywhere in this Genesis account, in any Bible today. Like, you go look at a Bible today, you're not going to find this. Abraham, to put it bluntly, is the first dude who is promised this land. No one before him is promised in the biblical text this land, according to the mythology of this story.
Yes,
I mean, it's
So it could be an etiological story, which is a sort of a way of accounting for why things are in the first place, which may not be historical, but it's what we, how do we, a bit like, why do we wear clothes? Well, there was these people in a garden, and they took of the fruit, and then they had to cover themselves with leaves, and that morphed into the fact that we wear clothes today. That would be seen as an etiological story that young earth creationists take literally, but Bible scholars kind of say, this is just an accounting, and basically we don't think that it's historical. This is the same thing. Even in the Bible, you could say it's an etiological story of why the nations had different languages or something. But this is going further, because I've got a transcript here of it, and he goes, that's why Abraham is born in displacement. So Abraham is now born in displacement. So coming from Ur, where it actually says in Genesis 12, all his family and everybody are living in Ur. Apparently that's displacement. By the way, what he's trying to say is that's like the displacement of after AD 70 of Jewish people. He's saying Abraham's story is another version. So basically this is repicturing this displacement. Therefore, he's saying that Abraham is the first Zionist. He's the first Jew returning to his ancestral homeland. It's all happening again before the Canaanites were just basically people getting in the way and squatting and being able to live there. But he doesn't have control because the Canaanites are still in control. Notice all this language. The Canaanites are in control, returning to the land, ancestral land. And none of this is actually in the Bible text. But we do know where the story comes from, and it's not in the Bible. And then he's just about to say, we just said, fast forward 2 generations later. Oh, he did say this, to the 12 tribes of Joseph. They end up in Egypt. They spend time in slavery and eventually hold up. I think we're going to go to this bit then now. Eventually they come back again to their ancestral land. So basically, it's promised to Shem. The Canaanites squat there. So Abraham is kind of reclaiming what was given to Shem. Then they go down to Egypt, then they're reclaiming again through the conquests, which basically sets up that the conquests even through the conquests through Moses are actually getting people out of the land that was already yours. You see the difference? It's massively different than just God is saying, I'm going to give you this land and the people on it we're going to get rid of, which is the Bible story. It's like, let's get rid of the squatters. They shouldn't be there. And so this is where this is going. So let's play the next one then.
Yeah, and real quick, just if I can.
Oh yeah.
Genesis 12:6. I sent you this one when we were just prepping and talking about it. Yeah. And Abraham passed, or Abram, his name's not even Abraham yet, passed the land unto the place of Sichem, unto the plain of Morah, and the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Canaanites were then in the land. And then Genesis 13:7, and there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled in the land. Right? He's trying to act like all of that was already taken away. There was already an establishment promise of the land, as if that's already the case. No, the first time you get it is in Genesis 12, which is God saying, hey, I'm going to take you from your land. He doesn't say from this strange land that you're he's not a foreigner in the land of Ur. Okay. He is native. He's not like, they're not describing him as if he's some like displaced foreigner in this lost land. He says, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. By the way, this isn't the only story in history. That's where Myth Vision really likes to shine. We'll get into this stuff in a little bit, but there are other etiological, mythic epics, whatever you want to call them, of the origins of a people, of a nation, where God's promised them land, displacing people who are actually originally in those lands. It doesn't matter because God said so. The divine will is behind what's happening, so it's okay. I just think that's important to note those details, that it's already assuming they're already in the land before the guy he promises the land to is showing up to be saying, hey, this is the land I'm going to give to your descendants. There's also, the narrative function of these is precisely to establish that the patriarchs are sojourners in a land already populated by other peoples. The promise to Abraham in Genesis 15:18 through 21 specifies which peoples currently occupy the land that is being promised to him: Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Rephaim, Amorite, Canaanites, Girgashites. That's a terrible name.
Jebusites.
And Jebusites. 10 peoples. None of them is described as having taken the land from earlier Hebrew inhabitants. The strongest single rebuttal you can come to this guy is the claim in Ezekiel 16:3, where the prophet, speaking to Jerusalem in Yahweh's voice, identifies the city's ancestry as Canaanite, Amorite, and Hittite. So even the prophet, which many scholars think the prophets are older anyway than Genesis. Genesis is a later book. It's giving you an etiological myth of the origin story. But in Ezekiel, which scholars think is older than Genesis, it says that your city, Jerusalem's ancestors, are Canaanites, Amorites, and Hittites. It says this: and say, thus says the Lord God unto Jerusalem, thy birth and thy nativity is the land of Canaan. Thy father was an Amorite, and thy mother an Hittite. So even Ezekiel saying your daddy isn't like this like you're trying to tie this genealogical pull. No, dude, your ancestors come from these other already established cultures. Anyway, I should keep playing.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Do you want to comment on that?
No. It's so clear. I mean, the text could have said, I'm going to now take you to the land that your ancestor Shem was promised. Do you know what I mean? These people, I don't belong to them. It's my land for you. Anything could be said. Nothing of the sort is said. Like you said, it's not just the Canaanites. This guy talks about the Canaanites, doesn't he? I think he mentions the Canaanites being in the land. But that's just one group. There's all these others there who seem to be the original people. And I think it's obvious that part of this, Derek, is probably coming from the idea that in the Old Testament, it doesn't seem to really be a problem that God commands them to go in and kill every man, woman, child, and animal and leave the trees, but the sensitivities of modern culture is that looks like pure genocide. So now we've got to go back and actually have it not genocide. We're getting rid of squatters who should have, that. So the sensitivities in our culture have looked back at what they didn't see as problematic at the time. It didn't seem to be anyway in the narrative. Go in and kill them all, at least in the borders of Israel, of what would be Israel in Canaan, land of Canaan. And of course, even the land of Canaan as a name is like, I mean, it could have been called the land of Shem, So I mean, so you know what I mean? To give these hints or a clear story. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll get to your super chats here soon. I appreciate all the support.
Egypt, they spend time in slavery, and eventually, eventually they come back again to their ancestral indigenous land of the Hebrews that the Canaanites had taken over. And then there are three conditions for the Canaanites. Either you live with the rule of law, you fight us, or you leave. Some left. Some decided to live with the rule of law of accepting the 7 laws of Noah: no idolatry, no killing, no stealing, no immoral sex act. And those who didn't went into war. So now you talk about DNA.
Dude, what?
Where's that? Where's this? Where's the? Notice the justification there. It's not even like we're going to go in and kill the Canaanites now in the way the story seems to narrate in the Old Testament. It's like we'll give you an option: follow the rule of law, or you'll have to die, or get out or whatever. And yet the text often says, go and kill everybody in those borders, wholesale, and leave the trees in some passages. And it's like, where on earth is he getting this? I can't find anything. I can't think of anything in the Bible where there's the 7 rules of law of the Noachic covenant. Is that what he said?
Yeah, I think he said something. He's pretty much doing the whole Noahide. There's like a Noahide kind of rule.
No idolatry, no killing, no immoral sex. Yeah, where would he doesn't quote any Bible passages, does he? Really?
No. He ultimately, remember, this is before God gives the law, right? According to the chronology of people don't. It's hard because when you're dealing with the person who's like fundamentalist about their scripture, how do you explain to them? They have an explanation, of course, that there's already like God's revealed his law in certain ways, but there's no law given yet till Exodus with Moses. So he doesn't really give his law until Moses. But how does Noah know what's clean and unclean? Right. So they have this justification they come up with for how the law is already a known thing through Noah. There's like a part of the law. There's 7,
clean animals. Yeah. It's a good point. It's like coming up with plot holes and saying we need to fill the plot holes.
Bingo. That's all it is. But the problem, is the problem, because in Exodus 6, when Moses appears before the burning bush, who are you? I am that I am, tell him I am who I am that I am. And he's like, oh, really? He says, my name was once El Shaddai. Your ancestors knew me as El Shaddai, but you know me now as Yahweh. His ancestors knew him as El Shaddai. Go back and read in the chronology of how the Bible portrays it, and let's see where that El Shaddai shows up. It was Yahweh already. So why is his ancestors knowing him as Yahweh throughout the biblical text? When you're saying it's El Shaddai, well, someone should have fixed this. Some final redactor should have went, Abraham must have been talking with El Shaddai here. No, he's talking with Yahweh. And anyway, so this is one of those little funny
clear evidence of sources. Yeah,
exactly.
It's clear evidence of different sources, not one author, because you can't have Yahweh way back then and now I'm revealing it as Yahweh. It's like your special pleading, plot hole filling. Anyway, and that's just the Bible, let alone the stuff where this is coming from.
Exactly.
I
I
think that was the end of the clip of the important bit. He then goes on to DNA, I think.
I think it's only 1 second left of what you sent me video wise, so we've already exhausted that one. You could see here we're at 123.
Right, okay.
1 second left. So the other clip, you said these guys actually portray it a little easier to understand, if I'm not mistaken.
A little easier, and also they're saying almost like, now make of it what you think. I mean, that's probably a good thing to say. I know these guys. I know there's kind of videos that they do, very Christian, evangelical, pro-Israel, and I think they even live in Israel. But it obviously they probably want to get this idea out because, of course, once you start thinking, oh my gosh, it belongs to them in the first place under Shem. It's nothing about driving people out who are just bad. We can change the story. We're now claiming our land. And when you start to claim land back, it's a different feel, isn't it?
Well, isn't that kind of what we're kind of stuck with dealing with politics in some way, because you can't, like, how can you not look at modern things and think about what's going on with Putin? The way he did this with Tucker Carlson in his interview was like, so why are you doing this? And he's like, well, 800 years ago, this was part of our land. And it's like, so I saw someone really funny made like a comical kind of skit about that interview. And we're like, so tell us, why are you doing this again? And Putin, like, they made a funny joke where Putin goes, 14.6 billion years ago, the universe began. And so what happened during the, like as if he's going way back here to justify what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And it's like 14.6 billion years ago. Like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's the same thing with the settler violence at the moment in the West Bank. It's awful. It's really ramped up. It's horrible, terrible things are happening. But if you were to ask one of the people, you could almost imagine one of the people saying, now, why are you doing this? Oh, because God promised to Shem that this was our land. So we're only just taking it back. That would be the justification for doing all the things they're doing, because they say, well, and no one else other than a specific line of this, because Semitic is you just talked about it, isn't it? Semitic is actually quite a broad term, isn't it?
Yeah.
Covers probably what would be the Palestinians, but actually you need to get to the more narrow one in order to say this is what was meant by the Shem thing. And can you imagine? I mean, even it's bad enough to just say it was promised to us, and then you have to go, I know we got rid of the Canaanites and all the Amorites and everything else, but we'll forget about that. It's promised to us. But now you can go back and say everybody's trying to steal it from the very beginning of creation, almost. Well, not creation, but before anyone was really settling anywhere.
Right.
The very first settlements were for a particular people, and it's like, gosh, I mean, you could say that like Putin was doing it. You could say it from anybody, and I think we mentioned it off air, didn't we? That whoever sets foot in an empty land, that's it, it's yours. And so that's almost the premise, isn't it? If you set foot in the land once, it's always yours. Anyway, yeah.
Why would
try and play the other
about this too? Like, yeah, I'm gonna try to play it. It's let me copy and paste it actually, because it's being funny. It's opening in a different browser. But like, why would it be called the land of Canaan in the Bible, right? Why would you even call it the land of Canaan? Like, biblically speaking.
I mentioned that. I was going to say it could have been the land of Shem,
Right.
Yeah.
So why are they calling it that? Odd, isn't it?
Very odd. And like you said, anything in the text not only doesn't mention what he's saying, it actually gives text the other way. Like it says, look, it belongs to, he just mentioned the Canaanites. He didn't. What about all the other people? It's not just the Canaanites that were there.
Right. A ton of other people.
In that sense. I mean, yeah, unless you wanted to use Canaanite as an umbrella term for all the others. It does seem that the narrative is saying, look, all these people, it was not an empty land, clearly full of people, clearly need killing. And different justifications in the Bible come about for that. I mean, that's so hard in apologetics today to defend it. You've done videos on this, haven't you? And everything else. So hard to defend it, that this is probably one way. Another way to defend it. It isn't just we're taking someone else's land. And is it not true that modern archaeology, with the experts that you've talked to, basically say that Israel came out of the Canaanites? It wasn't actually.
Yes, that's the
conquest.
The actual
the conquest didn't happen. Basically,
Basically, yes. Yeah. I mean, maybe there were internal strifes among tribes, but like they are indigenous. Ultimately, Israel were Canaanites. That's really what it was. It's an internal thing. And the example, Ronald Hindle, who's a Hebrew Bible scholar and has dug into this stuff a lot, he says the analogy he would give is Americans. When American settlers came to the United States, and then there was a war against, the French, and there's, obviously issues with Britain as well. They were Europeans. They came over as Britons. They came over as French, but they became a new identity. And they called themselves Americans, even though they were actually Europeans from that area. So that new identity becomes made over time as they become a distinct group from the original group they were. That's how he tries to explain it for what happens. But they were all native to this territory, and no outsiders coming in. That is the myth. That's the story that is being told. There's also another interesting passage too in Deuteronomy 26:5. It says, "And thou shalt," this is King James, of course, "thou shalt speak and say before the Lord thy God, a Syrian ready to perish was my father. And he went down into Egypt and sojourned there with a few and became there a nation, great, mighty, and populous." So modern translations render the opening line as, "A wandering Aramaean was my father." Israel's ritually required self-description identifies its ancestor as Aramaean, Mesopotamian, not Canaanite. The credo is not a private theological speculation, but a public mandatory liturgical recitation. The Israelites who recite it are confessing every harvest season that they are not indigenous to Canaan in any genealogical sense. Their ancestor is from somewhere else. So even within, that's why, even the tradition's not univocal, but like, he's not even from the Israelites who are saying this in Deuteronomy 26:5 are saying, my ancestors not from this land. Like, we're not from this land. That this is some really later idea, it seems, that this guy's trying to argue for Zionism. And I find it odd. It must be due to, I mean, especially him using it today, ethical issues as to why he's trying to give himself pedigree in this argument. But there are many other examples we will get into where you can look to other stories, and they didn't come up with, let me make sure my guy got the oldest, we had it first kind of argument. No, all they needed was divine will saying, it's yours. Go get it. It's yours. If the gods say it's yours, that's all that matters,
Yeah. He's responding, I think, possibly to a lot of people on the pro-say Palestinian side who I think even she does it, possibly in another part of this video, possibly, or someone did. It's that people know the story. They know the Canaanites were there before. And so they are arguing is that we come from the Canaanites. Now, whether that's true DNA or what, I know you probably know more about the DNA thing, that if Israel did come out of the Canaanites, then of course, that's the Canaanite is before the specific Jewish story. So if you can argue that the Canaanites are there, now people wouldn't like that. We don't know. We don't want to say the Canaanites were there first and therefore we all descend from them, because that makes it like it could belong to a lot of people, which is a good idea, in one sense, if you want to do that. Jewish and Christian and Islamic people, Muslims, were living in the Holy Land for hundreds of years, all through the Ottoman Empire and everything, largely in peace. And so I think people back then would have thought, we can do this, we can all share the land, and maybe argue that eventually all argue that we came from Canaanites, before Abraham. And so and that's, but they're saying, well, we can't do it. So I think he might be responding to people who say, this is our ancestral home, we're coming back to ancestral. No, Canaanites were before you. I've heard people say that Canaanites were before you, let's talk about them. So he's going to go no, we were before Canaanites. I think that's what's pushing it. As well as sensitivities about the genocide. And again, because I naturally thought I naturally thought even a long time ago, I was thinking when people saying we're coming back to the promised land because it's ours and God gave it to us, I'm thinking that was after the Canaanites were there and they were all killed. And I always realized that in the story. And I thought, why don't we give any sympathy to the Canaanites? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, because they'd be, how you paint the other side as bad. The winners win. The Canaanites may not have been as bad as the portrayal that they get in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, in reality, because we know that victors talk about the ones that they've killed or taken the land off, often in terrible terms. Do you know what I mean? Which eases the taking of the land. If they said this was a wonderful people, they were peaceful, they came to give us gifts, they were lovely people, but we just killed them and took the land, that doesn't go down so well. They've got to be cannibals, they've got to be child sacrifice, they've got to do everything. And so it's not hard to see how the Canaanites were presented, because people will go, well, if they're that bad, then get rid of them. And that's, again, another justification. Were they that bad? Well, the archaeology, as far as I know, doesn't show that they were as bad as the portrayalers said they were. Or you could argue that Israel were as bad as the Canaanites in their own way. Child sacrifice, that's another big topic, isn't it? And you've done that, I think. Sacrifice to Yahweh, I mean. So, Anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's
topic.
propaganda. I think again, it's just propaganda, and it's what you do. It's what you do. But the fact that propaganda is being believed literally and used as a weapon for current events like that is ridiculous to me. And I think we need to call it out. I think it's bullshit. You know, that's why we're doing this show. I have it ready to play whenever you want.
Yeah, play it away. Play it away. Yeah.
I had to share it to we may have to pause this one too, just in case along the way, but I'll let you tell me when and where. So this is Bearded Bible Bros. Here we go.
Jewish writers that chronicled the territory, the land of the time after the flood. So you can take it with a grain of salt, if you will. But it's very interesting. One book called the Book of Jubilees describes that immediately after the flood, that God told Noah to divide the land by lot to his 3 sons. And they all had to make a promise.
So hold on, let me just pause it here. Book of Jubilees. I'm going to have to pull this up just to see what he's talking about. Or do you have that source by any chance?
Do I have what? Sorry?
The Book of Jubilees?
Just looking up something. I don't. No. Oh, no, I have a thing about it. And so, yes, I've got a thing about it here. When it's saying the key sources of this is so the idea that the Canaanites stole the land from the descendants of Shem largely stems from the apocryphal Book of Jubilees, which expands on the Genesis story. This is in the 2nd century BC, stating that, and basically what said Noah divided the land with his sons and allotted Shem's descendants, justifying the later Israel conquest, by the way. So I did mention this earlier. It's Book of Jubilees, chapter 10. I haven't got it there, but it's saying that this text explicitly claims that Canaan violated the covenant, acting against his father Ham and uncles Shem and Japheth by settling in the Levant rather than his own allotment, which would have been what the other guy was saying was Africa. So that's what I've got here on that. Yeah.
I have it ready to share the online pseudepigrapher.com. We'll pull it up when it's time. And we'll go through a few of these examples. It's also in book 8. It seems in book 9. So maybe it's leading up to book 10. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll find out. So let's finish what he had to say. I just wanted to give it a pause so that we don't get dinged.
Everybody stay within your land. Don't war and take other people's lands. That land of Israel that we know today was so plenteous, everybody wanted it, but it was promised to Shem and to his lineage. Well, here comes Canaan. He takes that land for his inheritance, starts squatting on it.
Squatting. By the way, is this guy like do you know if these guys are Christians and they're like
yeah. I think I've seen them before. Pretty sure I've seen a couple of episodes of their work, and they are like fully pro sort of modern state of Israel as a fulfillment of of biblical prophecy in the evangelical interpretation. So whatever mess is out there in terms of the Palestinian conflict, it has to all happen because God has given the land. So in other words, that guy that's on the Jubilee, he would agree obviously with what these guys are saying, and this is now evangelicals trying to use it because they need to support the current status fulfillment of prophecy, in the sense that it's retrieving stolen land, new language.
I wonder how much is in Jubilees that they would quickly dismiss if we highlight what it says and compare it to the biblical account, because Jubilees often conflicts and contradicts on genealogies and all sorts of things. It's just been a while since I've evaluated this book, but I do wonder when you face those, that didn't happen. You don't accept that from Jubilees. But soon as you get some kind of folktale to try and describe a variation of the myths so that you can explain what's going on in Genesis, which is often what happens later, right? Enoch seems to be portraying this idea of filling in the gaps, the plot holes for why Enoch was taken by God after 365 years. What's with the sons of God? How do we explain what's going on in Genesis 6? Enoch in the Book of the Watchers tries to deal with that and other things as well. Let's continue.
Him and his son say, no, Canaan, you can't do this. You can't take someone else's land, or you're going to place your descendants under a greater curse. He doesn't care. He does it anyways. And this would give stock to why in the future God calls Abraham to that land of Canaan and promises that land as his eternal inheritance, because it was already promised to Shem.
So, okay, lots to unpack. Lots to unpack. Oh gosh. So Shem was obviously the son that represented the Semitic peoples.
Yes. Yeah.
Ham obviously for the African regions and European regions for Japheth. That seems to be a no-brainer. So what is Jubilees doing? And these guys just buying it hook, line, and sinker. Is Jubilees playing into this? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's just second century BCE discussions of it, you know, like looking at the story. And it really is probably no different than, you know, the flood story's been re-looked at. So the flood story is a very short passage, isn't it? But there's been stacks of later Jewish literature about what happened, including the Watchers. And you know that film that was a big Hollywood movie with Russell Crowe, Noah? Yes. I really liked it, but it was actually drawing so much from extra biblical, much later Jewish language. And so when people say, well, that's not in the Bible, that's not in the Bible, and these watchers weren't in the Bible, and all the creatures that were helping them build the ark, well, that's an interpretation of the watchers from much later material. So much so that you know, the Noah story got packed out with later. So it's probably no different than unpacking, putting into Luke all the stuff that happened in one of the infancy gospels, and say, you know, when he was 12, oh yeah, that's when he turned the birds into, what was it, clay pigeon, into, what was it, the one with the birds?
You're talking about the infancy gospel of Thomas with Jesus turning the and he kills
whatever
other kids too, and all sorts of
stuff.
He
kills a teacher for questioning him or something like that, and then I think raises him from the dead again. But it's a bit like using those stories to go back and justify something. You know, when Jesus did this with the teacher, well, that's why we can kill the teachers, you know. And it's like, hang on, you're assuming what even Christians or Jewish people would say is not part of the Hebrew Bible, not part of the Christian Bible. Later stories, this Jubilees is 2nd century BC, packing out in fantastical detail of the one with the flood, a Book of Enoch, I think, and other literature, packing it out with incredible fantastical detail that most people would dismiss. And then so Jubilees has got some interesting stuff in it, like you said, that really does contradict elements of the Hebrew Bible. And like you said, it will be special pleading to take one particular strand of its thought to tell you really what's going on in Genesis.
Absolutely. I'm looking for the exact locations so that I can share the screen and show everybody what's going on here. In fact, I can crop in here, make sure I got it nice and big. So I have Jubilees. I have that up. I'm trying to get exact sources of where this is at in Jubilees so we can read it together, go through a little bit, because Jubilees is like almost like it's a form of scripture, if you could say, but it's kind of like a commentary / rewrite. Let's see. Noah divided. So the argument from Jubilees is something like Noah divided the earth by lot. Shem received the sacred central land, including the land after called Canaan. Canaan, a son of Ham, illegally settled in Shem's portion. Therefore, Canaanites are squatters, and Israel's later possession of the land is framed as a return to the land that belonged to Shem's line. That is really in Jubilees, but it is not how Genesis itself tells the story. So, Genesis. So let's see. Jubilees 8, 10 through 11. Let me share my screen here, just so we could see it for our own eyes. All right, 8, 10 through 11. And it came to pass in the beginning of the 30-year Jubilee that they divided the earth into 3 parts for Shem and Ham and Japheth, according to the inheritance of each in the first year in the first week, when one of us who had been sent was with them. And he called his sons, and they drew nigh to him, they and their children, and he divided the earth into lots, which his 3 sons were to take in possession. And they reached forth their hands and took the writing out of the bosom of Noah, their father. And there came forth on the writing a Shem's lot in the middle of the earth, which he should take as an inheritance for himself and for his sons, for the generations of eternity. There's that perpetuity kind of idea, right? Like this is your land forever. By the way, here's the thing. I think what you and me are trying to say is, sure, get me a source. Okay, cool. why is this text actually making people really like go, no, if a book says it back here, that's it. This is like, this is it. If a book says it, that means it's for sure. It's like, no, we're trying to dismantle all of that. Like this whole like, oh, a book says it, I must trust it. But anyway, so for eternity.
Well, notice that he said the Torah. He said, oh, now you've brought up the Torah. Let me tell you what the Torah basically says. He's not talking about the story from the Torah. He's talking about a story from Jubilees. The Torah is classically the first 5 books, isn't it? And and so he's going back, Noah, the ark. Well, and then when he goes, well, he then in a sense slides the Torah aside, dives into 2nd century BC Jubilees and starts quoting, basically telling this story. Or at least I bet you, I would really seriously wonder whether people interpret this different anyway. But it's, but this is where he's really going. What he should have said is that, the Torah, well, there's some later books that sort of tried to expand on the Torah, and they had a version that said that we had the land under Shem. That would have been more respectful way of saying it, wouldn't it?
Well, real quick,
anyway,
just so we should read through this because this goes up to chapter 9. We'll try to read this quick as we can, so people can at least say they've heard this story. If you ever come across it, you understand that this is from a rebooted Genesis story. It's really not Genesis. It's a reboot, theologizing story. And anyway, from the middle of the mountain range of Rapha, from the mouth of the water from the river Tina, and his portions goes towards the west through the midst of this river, and it extends till it reaches the water of the abysses, out of which this river goes forth and pours its waters into the sea of Maat. And this river flows into the great sea, and all that is towards the north is Japheth, and all that is towards the south belongs to Shem. And it extends till it reaches Carasso. This is the bosom of the tongue which looks towards the south. And this portion extends along the great sea and extends in a straight line till it reaches the west of the tongue, which looks toward the south. For this sea is named the tongue of the Egyptian sea. And it turns from here towards the south, towards the mouth of the great sea of the shore of its waters, and it extends to the west of Afra, and it extends till it reaches the waters of the river Gihon, and to the south of the waters of Gihon to the banks of this river. And it extends toward, it's given a lot of geography, so I'm going to kind of skip some of this. This portion came forth by the lot of Shem and his sons, and they should possess it forever unto his generations forevermore. And Noah rejoiced that this portion came forth for Shem and for his sons. And he remembered all that he had spoken with his mouth in prophecy. For he had said, blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and may the Lord dwell in the dwelling of Shem. And he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies and the dwelling of the Lord. And Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These 3 were created as holy places facing each other. And he blessed the God of gods, who had put the word of the Lord into his mouth, and the Lord of forevermore. He also knew that a blessed portion and a blessing had come to Shem and his sons unto the generations forever, the whole land of Eden, and the whole land of the Red Sea, and the whole land of the east and India, and on the Red Sea, and the mountains thereof, and all the land of Bashan, and the land of Lebanon, and the islands of Kaftar, and all the mountains of Sanir and Amana, and the mountains of Asher in the north, and the land of Elam, Asher, Babel, and Susan, and Maedai, and all the mountains of Ararat, and all the region beyond the sea, which is beyond the mountains of Asher to the north, a blessed and spacious land, and all that it is in it, very good. What's really funny is it sounds like Genesis, very good creation kind of stuff, but you have to ask fundamental questions like, hold on, you just had blessings from God, the God of gods, the all-powerful mighty one. How the hell could he allow all this to go into complete chaos like this after promising these things? Wouldn't you think that it's like from a human standpoint, I have 3 boys, right? I do not want my kids to ever be in civil war strife with each other. I want my children and my children's children to be at peace. And if I have the power to be able to not have this happen, I wouldn't let it happen. I'd let them find a way to enjoy life and love and be in peace with one another. How does this all fall apart? anyway, so it says up to this verse, but then it's going to give you a bunch of more geographic stuff. Then it says chapter 9, verse 1. I believe it says chapter 9. Chapter 9, verse 1. Yeah. Ham divided amongst his sons, and the portion came forth for Cush toward the east, and to the west of him for Mizraim, and to the west of him for Put, and to the west of him, and to the west thereof on the sea of for Canaan. So it goes on to describe what happens with this story this guy's describing here. The problem is Genesis does not say this. In Genesis 10, Canaan is simply listed as a descendant of Ham, and the text gives the borders of Canaanite territory. So maybe we pull up in Genesis 10, we could pull up this exact location if we need to for people to see. Can you see my screen now with the scriptures? Yeah, here we are.
Yeah.
Okay, zooming in, trying to give this. Canaan was the father of Sidon, his firstborn. Heth, the Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Archites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zemarites, and Hamathites. Eventually, the families of the Canaanites were scattered. They're scattered, right? Eventually. And the borders of Canaan extended. So in the borders of Canaan, so when they got scattered, their borders extended. From Sidon, which we just read this was something that was meant for Shem, all the way to Gerar as far as Gaza. This very territory.
Yeah.
It's happening today, right?
Ironically.
Yeah. And all the way to Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim as far as Lasha. And notice Sodom and Gomorrah get brought up. We know that's where Abraham is talking, right? So the Canaanites are already spread right there in the genealogy. There is no pause and go, Canaan stole his brother's land. Like, none of that stuff happens here in Genesis.
Yeah.
And their territory is just extended. It's extended. So now you have this plot hole in this later Jubilees trying to explain this extension. And I'm gonna keep trying to. If you want to comment on that, feel free.
No, it's just like it's complex on the idea that the archaeology is sort of showing that everyone came out of Canaanites in the land, and maybe a certain group segregated over some issue, and they said, right, we won't eat pig, and then you tribalized off, and then you had one group. Some people do moot still the idea of a very small outbreak from Egypt, in which they could have brought it of an early version of henotheism. I think it's Anarchin or whatever his name is. You know what I mean? Some people sort of, but even if it wasn't that, there's this small group that joined. I know there's one scholar that argues that the Levites were probably a small group from Egypt that came and joined this other tribe, and then they started doing the separate eating and stuff, and became part of joined this particular Canaanite group. But a lot of it's just sort of mooted as ideas. But there's he made I thought he made a very good case for the Egypt link and the out of Canaan link, both together. But it wouldn't have been a massive exodus from Egypt. It would have been a small group who were coming. So that's people that that argue for a kernel of truth for the Exodus. But it could have even happened he seems to think it might have happened in the 11th century. So it's after all the classic dates that don't work.
Interesting.
But even then, the Canaanites are seen as a particular view, and you can imagine that as an etiological story. In reality, we came out of the Canaanites, but we need a story to say we were not them, because we want to get rid of them. And that could have been the etiology. The reality of history could have been, we are you, but we've got a story that's making us not you. So we then come out of Egypt, and then we kill you. And that may not be true at all. And so it's like, so this whole idea of Canaanites, it's almost like we disinherit our origin story that would have been the real one. And it sounds terrible to say that if you think about it, but I mean, that could be the thinking, isn't it? We want to make ourselves new people coming to the land because we're not you. And in the reality, they are you, and they've just separated from within the land over different views, ideals. This is why that particular scholar, I forget his name, very well-known Old Testament scholar, he thinks
Israel Finkelstein?
A small group came of Egypt. No, that's more of an archaeologist. This is a Bible scholar. I think it's called, I'll get you the name afterwards. He actually got a book that's read in all colleges and universities called How to Read the Bible or something like that. I've got a massive book by it, and he makes a very, very strong case for the Levites being ultimately from a group from Egypt who then join the Canaanite particular faction, and that's possibly where the beginnings of monotheism started at that point. And it's a fascinating argument, but again, he's using reams and reams of this. I forget his name now. You probably would have heard of him. Very famous Old Testament scholar. Not someone that you've had on. He's actually a Jewish guy. So, but he's like a bona fide kind of biblical scholar, not a archaeologist. He's the one that would argued with Finkelstein about some stuff by saying, Finkelstein would say there was no Exodus at all. This guy says there was a mini one, and they combined it. And I know that Francesca Stavrakopoulou said that there's possibly a case for like 10,000 people or something coming out of Egypt to join as one possibility. I'm sure I heard her say that. If not, there's no Exodus at all, so I'm not sure if she thought that, but she said, oh yeah, some people think this, and their scholarly view, I mean, certainly not 2 million or, what accounted to be 2 million plus
600,000 fighting men or some crazy number.
Yeah, plus women and children, and the average children. So you're ending up got 2 million. Nobody in scholarship actually believes that, but some people believe a small group came out. So I kind of think maybe if there's a case for that, I'm quite happy if the evidence is there and people make a good case for it. But who am I? But I always look at the scholarly world and see what one says and what one says, and see balance up as you do, basically, don't you? And maybe persuaded by one scholar more than another. That happens. That would happen with me as well.
If I may just to be on the Jubilees and Genesis thing before we get to some super chats is I wanted people to notice that Genesis does not say Canaan stole Shem's land. Number one, it does not say Noah assigned the land of Canaan to Shem. It does not say the Canaanites were illegitimate squatters because of a pre-Abrahamic land lottery. That's Jubilee's expansion, which scholars have already said is like a rewrite of Genesis. All it is a rewrite, and that the biblical promise to Abraham is later, and it's different from what we find in the Table of Nations that you get with the genealogies. And Genesis, the land promise comes with Abraham, not with Noah's division of the earth. Which we could pull up that. Actually, I could just show the verse so people could see it on my screen here.
Yeah,
it's Genesis 12. I prefer the NRSUV. Here we go. This. Oh, what happened? There we go. That's why. Genesis 12. There we go. And so, which verses is it? 6 through 7. I think Abraham passed to the land of the place of Shechem to the oak of the Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land.
Canaanites were in the land.
Yeah, because he literally says,
not in your land, by the way.
No, yeah, they were in the land, but that's the land, of course, he promises him. But they were already there, and to argue, it's just silly to me. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. Not to your ancestor, I gave this land. Do you see what I mean? It's kind of obvious, isn't it? If the promise was already given before, then he should have said, to your ancestor Shem, I have promised. So this should not be in Abraham. It should be in Shem, and all the descendants of Shem. Yeah. And that happens in the Old Testament, doesn't it? In other ways, when it goes, to Jacob, it sometimes goes, I'm the father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it's cashing back in with later people. So it can be done in the Old Testament where we're going back to someone, but here it's not doing that. It's like this is the beginning, and it's clear because of all the all these people are in the land. You've just read about the borders being expanded. There's basically nothing there. Another thing, by the way, about Jubilees, I'm not sure if you noticed this, but if you go back, I think when I was reading it earlier, just a little bit, it talked about Noah writing all this down. I don't know if you can find, if you could just type in, and of course that's a joke, isn't it? Noah couldn't be writing anything down. I mean, he may not have existed.
for example, straight away. But just in case he was,
I would say
I'm
99.9999.
I mean, it's people debate over what Moses could have possibly written down if Moses existed. It's all, you've done a lot on this, haven't you, about when Hebrew could have actually been really written.
Right.
And I think the idea is it's more like 7th century, not 12th, with Moses, with the whole alphabet argument and all the rest of it. But here, if we're talking about, like people thought the Book of Enoch was a real thing that was written before and came through the ark. I think it's is it Justin Martyr or Tertullian thinks that it came through the ark. So people had this idea that writing was going on back in the mythical times. I don't know if you can find the word writing in there, but I'm sure it said
right here. And Noah wrote down all things in a book as we instructed him concerning every kind of medicine. That's
get out of town.
Noah's writing what?
Writing down. What's he writing? I mean, so not only are all the animals being also, is he writing this down like having exited the ark, or yes, this would have been post the flood, wouldn't it?
And took particular thing, the writing out of the bosom of Noah, their father. Yeah. So they're like, I read this earlier, but we passed by it and didn't really catch it.
Yes.
This is claiming Noah wrote this shit down. Like Noah wrote all this down, and they're like, "No, let me grab it from your bosom." And I'm gonna.
So it makes me think that when the animals, after the dove, and when the animals were coming out, and everything, all the 2x2 or 7x7, whichever source you want to use, and the flood waters were going down, and they go, "Can you just go back in and get my writing pen and tablets or whatever?" You know what I mean? I need to write some shit down, as you would say. It's like. What? I mean, nobody today in scholarship would ever say any of these mythical, and even if there's a kernel of historical stuff with Abraham, nobody was writing in that way. I mean, maybe it could have been written on stone, but there's no hint of that. I mean, or it's like saying, Shem, can you go in and bring the tablets out that I put in? Just, you know what I mean, from prior stories. I even had some young Earth creationists thought that Adam wrote stuff down and in tablets, and that they were passed down the generations and through the ark. I've actually heard a Christian say this. I nearly fell off my chair. Imagine Adam was going, just a minute, let me just write down. So I was made yesterday, Eve was my wife, and we've now been expelled from the garden, so it's like, so keep these tablets for prosperity, because this is how we've got accurate eyewitness testimony. This is what he was saying. We have eyewitness testimony because Adam wrote stuff.
Right.
And he's not a scholar, he's just a nuthead young Earth creationist. Yeah.
But it does convince people like that. And it convinced people back then, just like it convinced people today. Just to make this point, when we read this, right, talking about to your offspring, I will give this land. The Canaanites are already there. This is the thing. It's different from Jubilees. Genesis does not say this land was already Shem's and Canaan stole it. Genesis says the Canaanites are there, and then Yahweh promises the land to Abram's descendants. That means Jubilees is solving a theological problem in Genesis. Here's the problem. How can Israel later claim that land already occupied by Canaanites? Jubilees answers by inventing or maybe preserving an early tradition where the Canaanites were illegitimate occupiers from the beginning, likely an invention, though. There's all sorts of critical scholarly positions on this. Jubilees is not neutral history, obviously. It's a Second Temple Jewish rewriting of Genesis, probably from the 2nd century BCE, as you said. It reshapes earlier biblical traditions for theological and ideological purposes. There's a lot more that can go into this. But when you just read, we're in chapter 12, but if you just go and read like Genesis 4, right? Oh, give me internal server error. Here. Okay. So now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, right? This is the one where it's like, he gets this curse, right? He kills his brother. He's running from him, and he's concerned about all these other people getting him. And people are like, hold on. We've all heard the problem. Where did the other people come from? Adam and Eve literally have Cain and Abel. That's it. You go to the next chapter, chapter 5, and you're already dealing with a different tradition. You're already dealing with a different tradition where Seth is there. So what I'm trying to say is, and there's genealogy issues. Like when you line up both genealogy side by side, scholars have long noted the problem on the biblical contradictions. So later writers who are trying to patch this stuff to make sense of it, they're dealing with other problems, are taking Genesis and going, this is kind of problematic. Like, how do we have a genealogy where Cain is a descendant of Ham? Ham is supposed to be under the jurisdiction of Africa. And how did the Canaanites, the descendants of this area, end up over here? Well, Genesis tells you they're just not happy with the answer, because it says that they spread out and their territory enlarged. That's simple. It's that simple. It's like, if you just have more kids and they spread out, then that land becomes theirs as well. Well, Jubilees is going beyond that and saying, no, the real reason is this. And now it's explaining this other thing, and these guys are buying it.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that it's not going to surprise you, Derek. I'm going to search this after we finish the podcast. I wonder if there's anyone that says the land was given to Adam from the Garden of Eden. Can you just imagine it? I'll expel you from the garden, but the land of Canaan is yours. I don't know. I'm just saying it's almost like a joke on the idea, but maybe there's a crazy person out there that said that the land was given to Adam when he was expelled from the garden in some later literature. I mean,
it wouldn't shock me. Someone tries to say Eden is the land or something, or some, or or
Eden was the land. Yeah. Notice Jubilees talked a lot about Garden of Eden as if it was obviously very real, historical, and everything. And it says it goes right up to the Garden of Eden several times. You were reading it. It's Garden of Eden. So we're talking about like Tigris, Euphrates, and all of that business as Adam and Eve. So it already accepts, obviously in Jubilees, details about a historical reality to all of this, which is just like, what? This guy in Jubilees in 2026 is taking mythology as total historical reality to one of the people, and that's wild, isn't it? So I mean, it's been a great subject for you to sort of get into. You've obviously going to have to pass this one to Joel Baden and various other people that you have on, ones that their field would touch into this. And Joel Baden. Who else do you know that would actually love this question? John Collins.
John J. Collins would really laugh at this. He would just be like, "Oh, how ridiculous!" Like I could see him already doing that.
Or even Bob Price.
Yeah. He would look at that and obviously see this and go, "What the hell?" Yeah, I mean, it's it's a fundamentalist kind of
mindset.
Yeah, and it being used in like weaponizing, trying to explain. And the thing is, you should have other justifications. If you're going to argue something like that, it shouldn't be this. You got to come up with something better. This isn't working. This idea of pedigree, this idea of like, well, my book says something. Come on. I do have comparative parallels where there's chosen people and promised land narratives in ancient literature. For those who don't know, Virgil's Aeneid is an important one. I'll share the screen and show people just to help them out a little here, so they know that, hey, this is not a exclusive biblical thing. This is something that you're going to find everywhere. The Aeneid, of course, for those who don't know, covers the founding of Rome from ancient times. It reaches back to the Bronze Age with the Trojan War. And of course, Virgil's writing this under Augustus. Is it Augustus, or is he writing this under? He's writing this for Augustus. Literally, it's under the time of Augustus. So he's explaining the founding of Rome as it's divinely ordained. And one of the really crazy things a lot of people don't know. We'll get into it. Let me just read you what I put together, because this kind of tells you how an ancient mythical, epic tradition, etiological myth on how their nation came to be. Virgil's Aeneid was written in 29 to 19 BCE, is structurally the closest parallel in ancient literature to the Israelite Exodus conquest narrative. Aeneas escapes the destruction of Troy. I can't wait to see the new movie when it comes out. With the household gods, well, it's not Troy, it's the Odyssey, but still. With the household gods and a remnant of his people. Jupiter prophesies that his descendants are destined to rule Italy and to found an empire that will rule without end. Everlasting. That's in Aeneid 1, Book 1, 257 to 296. Aeneas sails through the Mediterranean, suffers exile, receives oracular guidance, lands in Latium and becomes embroiled in war against the indigenous, King Turnus and the Rutulians. The poem ends with the Aeneas killing Turnus and consolidating his hold on Latium. His descendants will found Rome. The structural elements, you have divine promise of a specific land, displacement and exile, oracular guidance to the promised territory, conquest of indigenous peoples, founding of a chosen nation, a divine destiny extending to imperial rule. Every major beat of the Israelite narrative has a Virgilian counterpart. The Aeneid is a foundational political theology for Augustan Rome, written explicitly to provide ideological legitimation for Roman imperial expansion. Several scholarly references to that. You also have the return, and I'm not going to read all these. I'm just going to give you, you can look these up. The return of the Heraclidae. It's the descendants of Heracles with the Pelasgian inhabitants and whatnot. Worth mentioning is the Sabine people, the Sabine. I don't know how you would properly pronounce the people, but the Romans, they sexually forced themselves upon these native people that were around Italy, and they have a myth that plays into the origin and founding of Rome, where they go and they abuse these women, and it's this horrendous scandal, but it gets justified in the long term for the founding of Rome. And of course, some say some of the bad things that happen in Roman history were due to the immoralities that were committed by our ancestors in this heinous act. Battus and the founding of Cyrene, Cadmus and the founding of Thebes, Romulus and the founding of Rome, the Hittite Anita text, Sargon of Akkad also has this kind of epic story. You have the Meshastili. We could get into all of this stuff, implications of the parallels. So the chosen people with the divine promise of land narrative structure is recognizable genre across Eastern Mediterranean and Near East for at least the 18th century BCE to the 1st century BCE. The biblical narratives sit comfortably within this genre. They are not unique. They're not categorically different in form from the Aeneid, the Heraclidae. I always butcher that. Battus colonization narrative, Cadmus founding, the Anita text, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think that's worth noting. Anyway, I wanted to give that just so people know. There's also one more I didn't add to the list, but could have, and that is there's a story about a king named Athamas. In fact, I'll just share the screen. And if you want to take this further, go to vridar.org. Just Google Phrixus and Phrixus as in Phrixus and Isaac. There is a Greek myth that parallels Phrixus and Isaac. In the myth, you have literally promised land, so many generations out. There's a sacrifice of a child that is attempted, and in both cases, the children are saved. One by an angel in the Genesis account, the other is by a golden fleeced ram that saves the children because Apollo ends up rescuing them. And it was Phrixus and Helle. What happens is as they're flying on the golden fleeced ram to escape Athamas, the king, their father, from killing him because he was tricked by his wife who's jealous of the children. And this gets into a whole bunch of background knowledge of like there was a drought, a famine, and then like they thought, okay, go ask Apollo. And the wife said to tell the king that Apollo spoke through the oracle and said, no, you need to sacrifice one of your children to help the land so that this famine will go away. Sure enough, he attempts to do it, but a golden fleece ram sent by Apollo rescues the children. Helle falls off of the golden fleece ram midair, falls into the water. To this day, they call that region Hellespont. And then Phrixus makes it to the destination in that land. On that land, when he gets there, he says, look, I'm going to make a sacrifice to you. So he sacrifices the ram and hangs the golden fleece in a tree. I kid you not. And the land that he does this on is the land that will be later promised, or it was promised already, but it will later be inhabited by their descendants. So it's already promised land. There were already natives that were there that they obviously had to take care of. It's another recycled mythology. And imagine if like Britain decided they were going to like use this story and then run around and just start like going crazy on people today, right? It'd be hell on earth. People would lose their minds.
The moment I did extensive research for one of our podcasts on the Doubts Aloud podcast, my favorite episode of all of the 100 that we're just about to do was in fact studying Mormonism. And there's a repatterning here because they saw going to Utah as the promised land. Actually, before that, they saw Texas, originally wanted like Texas as the promised land. And the Garden of Eden is over there. And the whole thing's been repatterning that God is calling us to a promised land. And so there were skirmishes when they got there because people were already in the land. And, you know, the Mormons were heavily persecuted and chased out of everywhere where they went. But there's also stories of Mormon gangs that were also killing people sort of en route and things like that. And so there's even a Netflix story that had that story going on there. Very good show. And so the idea is that a lot of gods are speaking to a lot of people about a lot of lands over history. And are they all there speaking? You know, I mean, I always think, I wonder if the Amorites could have had Chemosh, the Amalekites, could have had Chemosh inspire some kind of scripture for them. And they said, "Now, beware of these people over here. They're going to come and try and take your land. But I, Chemosh, have promised you this land." Yeah, it could have been something that could have happened. Yeah. You know, and the Chemosh is going, I will protect you. Matter of fact, if it gets bad, I will enable your kings to sacrifice your son on a wall, and great wrath will come against this people called Israel. You know, because that would be the Chemosh Amalekite side. And so I've often thought, I wonder what the alternate Canaanites, they're painting us so badly. They sacrifice, we don't. You know, it's like,
what if we found some piece of paper that was like, these assholes came up out of nowhere one day, and they, you know, like, I'm just like, clearly they're, I imagine the whole thing is a mythology that isn't depicting historical reality, but like, if there were people that were just surrounding them and said they're completely douchebags, I mean, look at what they did, and then they say that we were wrong because we've been doing customs that they also do. I imagine much of the stuff's written much later, Andrew, and it has totally. Yeah, like, even this is something that I'm not going to get into here, but Genesis, often we all know, has Mesopotamian background. Like, we could see the ancient Near Eastern stuff. But there are some things in Genesis that they don't have in ancient Near Eastern parallels that do show up in Greek parallels. I'm going to cover these in more depth down the road. The point is that Genesis itself likely is a much later writing. Possibly late Persian, even early Hellenistic material. Like, we're talking a lot of it in Genesis. I'm not saying all of it. I don't want to try and act like the whole book, but much of the material seems to have already been inspired by or aware of ideas and concepts the Greeks already have. And I'll have to cover that in great depth because that's not a commonly accepted position, even amongst the critical scholars. They just go with the ancient Near Eastern because it's far older. It's easier to say, clearly someone inspired them back here. But like, take the image of God, right? This idea that each human is an image of God, not a divine king only, but like humanity is. That is a Greek concept. Greeks already had this. And I think that this is an important point to point out, that when you're reading a narrative that's telling you all these events and stories, if it was written in the 4th century, 5th century BCE, we're talking 1,000, 2,000 almost years, not quite, but after Abraham, like, according to your chronology, they're not telling you what really happened. This is not a literal historical. Its sensitivities are going to be reflecting 4th and 5th century BCE ideals, and that's the point I'm trying to get at. So, anyway,
just a point on that. I remember spotting this great weakness in apologetics, and you've probably come across this. That, you know, there's a push. They don't. if the Bible's inspired, Bob Price says it doesn't matter if it was written 15 minutes ago. You know what I mean? That's a great quote, because it's like, it just means, why would you want to push the stories close to almost 5 years off the bat? You know, or the disciples are writing down the story. What was that again? You said, Jesus, this generation. So let me just get this down. Stop a minute. Let me get this down. Okay. Off the bat. It's all historical eyewitness testimony. Oh, somebody's saying Jesus isn't God. Right. They're heretics and I'm a witness. And then suddenly you got people that want to get Mark into the 40s, Paul writing earlier, creeds coming off the bat. Jesus gets off the cross, you know. And then because the push is of course scholarship is going the other way. We're now getting into the 2nd century for some books, Acts, Gospel of John, maybe, you know, certainly the pastorals. And then suddenly you go back to the Old Testament and you go, oh yeah, but we've got a 1500-year gap before we got eyewitnesses, you know. And it's like, but we accepted all as history, you know.
Yeah.
So what have you noticed that the push to get Mark early, to get it reliable, and then suddenly not thinking about, oh, even if Moses wrote in Hebrew in the 12th century about Adam and Eve, what, 1500 years before, where's the eyewitness testimony? Oh, that's why Adam had to start writing on tablets in the garden.
Right.
You've got to be consistent. Yeah. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, you're gonna have the,
you know. Yeah, it's like back to the flood again. You know, okay, zebras there. You know, mosquitoes, or goodness knows, whatever you want on the ark there. And Ham says, "What's this for, Dad?" Oh, that's for all our tablets from Adam and Noah, and Adam and anybody else beforehand. I just keep that for the tablets, because one day evangelicals and apologists will need this as eyewitness testimony.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah, it feels like you need them, like, because it's got a hole, right? They don't like the hole. The problem is even when you grant that hole to be filled by, oh well, text says that he wrote things down.
Yeah.
Like I have the hardest time, like, with my own family. I've my brother-in-law, for example. He always comes at me with like, "Did you hear about this new thing?" And I'm like, "What is it, man? What is it?" And he's like, "Dude, there's this video. There's this video online, and whatever it is, UAPs. It might be aliens. It might be whatever it is, some kind of conspiracy theory that usually is floating around." I'm like, "What's your source?" And he'll send it to me, and it's some testimony, someone saying something. Okay, that's equivalent to writing, or that's equivalent to any of that. And I'm like, now, why are we not being like hypercritical, like skeptical of anyone's testimony or written sources about anything? There's a gap there. Even if you said, all right, Moses wrote it, damn it, you guys win. Yeah, we're done fighting you, which is not even, that's not where the scholarship has gone. But
the apologists have this trouble. Have you heard of J. Warner Wallace?
Yes.
Now, I've got it on good record from the research that I've done that he doesn't like testimonies as evidence. And the reason being, a lot of his family, I understand, are Mormons, and they are full out on testimony. They are full out on the warming of the heart.
Yeah, they're
full out on that.
Yeah.
And so therefore the apologists are now, you know, because a lot of testimonies is like, well, God spoke to me. I know he's real. You know, I've got this healing. This has happened. And God was doing this and God was doing that. The thing is, when the Mormons start saying the same thing, you then think, okay, so what is God doing? Is that, you know, so let's just go to archaeology evidence and things like that. And I'm thinking testimony, as you said, doesn't actually work. Or you just heard a story. Or you're talking about anecdotal testimony, were you, or just somebody
I'm talking about, like, if I
says
told
that
you,
there's evidence. Yeah.
If I said to you, my dog got ran over by a car. Yesterday, it's likely you would believe me, because that happens, right? Like these things happen. I would need to, you wouldn't usually pause and go, that's not convincing. Like it's an ordinary situation that typically happens to a lot of people's dogs.
Now,
if I said to you, Andrew, listen, I won 10 million on a scratch off ticket yesterday in a lottery. Okay.
Yeah.
You might go, oh, okay. Like, you may not take it too seriously, but if you really, really, like, you might actually go, bullshit. Bullshit, bro. Yeah. Show me the receipt. Show me the statement. I can't believe you, man. Like you're convincible. I could convince you, but you're going to doubt that I won 10 million on a scratch off yesterday.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like when you have a claim that does have out of the ordinary events take place in them, Me telling you or a text saying this is what happened is I call bullshit. Until you can prove otherwise, I call bullshit. That's where I'm at with my thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I would even think that I always think about things like even in Luke, when Jesus ascended above a cloud and disappeared and the two angels said he's going to come back. I can just imagine a day later or something and somebody said, I think I saw you walking around with Jesus. Now, he sounded like a good guy. Where is he? I want to go and see him. Oh, he went up and up and up. He went behind a cloud and he's disappeared. I mean, most people today would think you need to now go to a special place and have some tablets and medication, you know. But then, presumably, I don't know, is it an insult to say people were more gullible back then? Or would there be people who would just be, this is crazy back then? I mean, you probably know more about this than me. It does seem that the worldview of the time was much more acceptable about what we would call crazy and what they might think is perfectly reasonable between supernatural histories, you know, because Josephus said crazy things to us as any modern historian, mixed up, didn't he? I think he said a lamb turned into a lion in the temple or something, all within his things. And you're thinking, okay, so was the mindset then so easy? But that doesn't help anyway, does it? Because if the mindset is something that we don't accept today, and we have to say they're gullible on the supernatural, then that's against them. That's an argument against it all being true as well, isn't it? But on the other hand, would people have been absolutely, because people mocked the resurrection, didn't they, at the time within the narrative? They were laughing at the resurrection. They were mocked the resurrection, the general resurrection of the dead. Yeah. People in Paul, in Acts.
Oh,
he talks about the resurrection. Oh, we can't accept this, say the Roman.
The Epicureans and Stoics.
Yeah. So there were people who weren't going, really? Resurrection? That's amazing. It was more like, we can't accept this.
Yeah. I think to your point, like, there's a mix. It just depends on the crowds. There are a lot of people who were clearly not. I think we have this this idea that, it was just those times that there were superstitious things. And don't get me wrong, it probably was a bit more like acceptable to be in a superstition at that time, when cults are on every corner and everybody's in a cult typically, or in some kind of group that has their own philosophy or whatever. And I think the most rational thinkers you're going to find in the ancient world were philosopher types. They were the ones who usually had the more thought out, more empirically based approach to things. But today, I do not. That argument kind of falls apart. You just take one quick look on TikTok, one quick glance on Facebook, just scroll a little bit on Twitter, and you will find out in a heartbeat how quick people are to just buy into narratives and go down rabbit holes and get stuck in. And I'm much more like, hold the phone, bro. I am. Like, I'm so much more like, I've been duped so many times as a young gullible Christian to believing in narratives and following what others thought, convincing me with their emotions or with their arguments to try and make a case. And if I'm not persuaded by the evidence, I'm just not going down the path. I'm going to sit back and go, let me look at this primary source again. Let me see what your actual evidence is. And then when they try to pressure you, because social groups do this, into thinking the way they think about something through whatever means, that's when you should really put your guard up even more. When you feel like you're being pressured to think about something a certain way, I'm even more like hesitant to go, hold on. You're not going to tell me what to fucking think. You're not going to tell me what I'm allowed to think about or how I'm supposed to assess and reason through this. And because I felt that too. I've had that happen to me in the past, and I'm not interested in that. So I guess because I've been duped, that my skepticism is heightened, and I'm I'm harder to convince. But you can convince me. Just show me the bank statement, and I'll believe you won 10 million yesterday.
That's well, you once believed that the new heavens and the new earth and the final state was present, I think.
Yeah, I did.
Beliefs.
At one point, I believed the Bible. When Jesus says in the text that these things would happen, I didn't think he could be wrong. So it had to have happened.
Yeah. And so your mind, it just shows you how your mind was actually shaped by beliefs and people telling you stuff. And that made more sense because the Bible can't be wrong. So you're being forced into positions that accept what's the best way the Bible can't be wrong? That was what was happening. And for you, it was, this must be the new heavens and the new earth. I mean, in all its craziness. And so I almost went there. So I get how my mind went. But just to bring up that point again, isn't there a bit in Acts that was really interesting when Peter and Paul together, were they both healing? And someone said, this must be Zeus. Then because they were healing.
They weren't together. It was two other guys.
It was Peter and I'm sure it was Peter, or was it a couple of other people? But they were healing. And then rather than someone saying, well, this is crazy, this doesn't happen, it was like, oh, well, there must be the gods then. So the assumption just immediately was, oh, gods are very real. And if you start healing, we'll assign Zeus to you. I'm sure there's something like that in the book of Acts. And I thought that shows you the mentality that perhaps most of us in the West don't have today. If someone says,
Paul and Barnabas.
Barnabas. And does it say something like
the Zeus and Hermes or Jupiter and
Jupiter?
Mercury.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? The immediate assumption, which is not what you would get from Richard Dawkins or someone today, if someone was healing and they'd go, oh my gosh, you must be Zeus, or something, or some rational thing. So even in the Bible, it presents people as very easy to believe in God's doing stuff, that the more scientific community wouldn't suddenly jump to those ideas compared with the narrative of them jumping to those ideas. And why would they jump to? I suppose their culture was saturated in Zeus and Hermes, Jupiter or whatever, and therefore their nearest point of, gosh, if miracles are happening, it must be the gods that we know that are real, by the way. So Zeus is real as far as that person would have believed. He wouldn't have been, I'm just going to evoke a fictional god to explain this. Do you know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is their acceptability was, this makes sense then, must be Zeus. It's crazy.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I fundamentally approach the book of Acts as a fiction. It's a fictional, I think it's a historical fiction or a fictional history of the early church. So when I read stories like, oh, they thought they were Zeus and Jupiter, they could have, maybe they were gullible enough, these people primed in that kind of cultic setting to think that, or it's just a story. And this is what they do with stories. I mean, if you go read, you ever heard of the story Philemon and Bacchus in Ovid's Metamorphosis?
Oh, no, I've heard the Philemon. I've heard this title, but no, I don't know the story.
Okay, so we got to get to these super chats here soon.
Yes,
but let me just show you. There's a Wikipedia page here, Philemon and Bacchus, right? And it's two gods that come in disguise, and ultimately you can see the old man on the right and the old woman on the right, and they've got their little roost. Well, looks like they've got a little duck here. The god Hermes and the god Jupiter, they approach. So what's happening in this village, there's 1,000 homes that these two gods in disguise approach, and 1,000 doors they approach and 1,000 doors turn them away. So this is called theoxeny in Greek, or xenia, hospitality, Xenia. But theoxeny is like a god hiding in disguise and makes an appearance, and xenia is hospitality. And in this story of Philemon and Bacchus, they approach 1,000 houses asking for food and hospitality. They all turn them away. Nobody helps them. But this old woman and old man at the end, Philemon and Bacchus, invite them in, and they're the poorest in the town. And they give them the very last bits of anything they had food-wise. They ask for drink. They gave them wine. It's very poetic. You should go read it. Well, what happens is finally, as they're drinking the wine and talking, the old man recognizes the little bit of wine they had left keeps filling up. And then he says to his wife, honey, I think these are gods. And next thing you know, they're entertaining gods. And then he goes, go get our last duck. You can see the duck. I think I'm not sure if it's a duck, a rooster, or whatever the actual original story says. She goes to try and catch it, but she's so old, she can't get fast enough to catch the bird so they can cook it for these gods. And because they showed so much hospitality, the gods, Hermes and of course Zeus, they bless them and ask them, if any wish you want, you name it. But before that, they warn them that there's a judgment coming. By the way, this has a lot in common with the Sodom and Gomorrah myth. A lot of people have no clue about. It's not the sexuality that the punishment is happening. It's because they were not showing these strangers hospitality. The story right before
that's a common view of the Old Testament story anyway. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's a wrong one because just go one chapter back, you could see 3 strangers shown hospitality by Abraham and his wife. And through that, there's a blessing. And of course, they entertain gods. They don't even realize it. Well, next story, these strangers appear, 2 of them in Sodom and Gomorrah. They treat them like shit, no hospitality. Then there's destruction. Well, this town that rejected Zeus and Hermes gets destroyed. But before it does, they take them up to a mountain, they flood the whole town, and then they say, ask for anything you want. And of course they say, well, they love each other so much. It's a romantic kind of myth. They love each other so much. They say, we want to be together forever. So he says, no problem. So then they go back down and they turn their little home that was a little nothing into a temple, and him and his wife turn into a tree, and they're a tree that's intertwined. So they end up like grown together. And of course, later Romans and Greeks would point to the tree at the temple and say, there's Philemon and Bacchus, the tree that's entwined. There they are to this day. The gods kept their promise. So when I read stories about, oh, they thought they were gods, I mean, for me, I think this is more likely a fiction for other reasons. The book of Acts seems to hint at that. But maybe people were running around thinking that people were gods for this reason, because we know that a lot of modern cults believe crazy stuff. I don't know if you saw.
Well, I watched that. I watched that program that I started watching it, and you recommended to fully watch it. It was the Mormon guy that had all the what a story. I mean, the I felt so compassionately sad for all the women there, the young ones and the older ones, because their belief was so real in their minds. And today, even some of them still think he was the new kind of man of God, I suppose, or some Messiah kind of figure. And it was just like, this all happened like 5 or 6 years ago, you know, or when it started and finished only 2 or 3 years ago, with this guy in prison. And of course they would, some of them would see it as like he was a false guy. Some of them would see that he's being persecuted, but their belief system that he was like thinking, I mean, he was even saying he wanted the Queen to come over and acknowledge that he was this person. It was like anybody else is going to see the guy should be in a mental home. Literally. And yet he was talking about God, literally. And the guy was talking about, and God has actually said to me about you. And he ended up basically having sex with all of them all over the place a lot of the time. And they still saw that as part of God's blessing in some way. And this has happened. That kind of thing is not new. There are tons of cultish behaviors that have this thing happening. It's the mentality of the people that firmly believe, oh, you don't know him like I do. He's clearly of God. You know, I know it looks bad from the outside, but you just don't know, you know. And
or even the part, if in the part in the episode, and I don't want to give it too much away, but if you're looking, go on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it. It's FLDS, the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. You know where I'm going with this, where he ends up having the other men sleep with his own wives, and they were like, I was scared. And then he goes, he's telling them in front of the people who are secretly recording the whole thing, like, no, cast it away from your mind. This was not evil. This was not bad. And you're going,
yes, that's right.
What? Yeah. And these are underage girls. These aren't even like grown women. These are children. Like it's pretty wackadoodle, man.
He got them when even some of the girls were thinking this was dark. He said, it's not dark. This is of God. And he's persuading them that it wasn't dark, you know, and it's like, it was unbelievable. I mean, I thought it was an unbelievable story. And the fact that you got the first people filming them under the guise of initially actually just wanting to know more about them and then realizing this was going on and carrying on. It was an amazing story. I was glued. I was actually glued. 4 episodes, Netflix. But the key point here is just the mentality. It's not changed. The mentality of the mind can be so sucked in that only outside people can see what's going on. Inside, even he knew what was going on. He was either 2 things. He was either completely and utterly deluded himself, a bit like the C.S. Lewis trilemma. He's Lord, liar, or lunatic. He was obviously a liar or lunatic, but he thought he was nearer the Lord. You know,
absolutely. And, your point is this point about what he was. I did an interview a long time ago about this, calling it the C.S. Lewis trilemma for Joseph Smith. Was he a liar, a lunatic, or Lord? Right, a divinity. And Bob Price was the one who wrote an article about this that made it into some journal, some popular magazine or something about this topic. And he highlights how Joseph Smith was a little bit of all of this in the way that it specifically was a liar and a lunatic in a sense. He was deluded.
Yeah.
And he believed his own bullshit sometimes. So this guy really, really was convinced of his stuff and yet was still a habitual liar. And so you have a lot of cult leaders that can convince, they will manipulate. They know they're going in, but then they're self-convinced deceptively somehow. The brain is not an either or machine. We can tell ourselves, we can convince ourselves. And that guy had the notes from the earlier prophet on how he did it with his dad, took all his dad's wives, did the same shit. So if you're looking for a follow-up episode and you didn't watch the other FLDS one, that's the latest, greatest one. You got to go back and watch the original.
I haven't seen that.
Okay. You got to go back and watch that. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane, bro.
But because of my extensive study on Mormonism, you could argue that Joseph Smith was doing exactly the same thing with what became plural marriage. He was basically sleeping all over the place. And rather than being caught or finding it, because he hid plural marriage for a while, he basically got a revelation from God that said, you can have more than one wife. And his wife hated the idea, but he said, well, your eternal destiny might be affected if you don't agree with me here. So he was already had other women. Then he already had hidden other wives when his wife was away or whatever. I think, and then Brigham Young had like 56 wives. And it seems to me from the outside, right there and then, I thought these guys are womanizing players. You know, they're like, you know, well, basically not a lot different than what you find with these guys. And I thought, hang around, when I was watching this program we were just talking about, I thought this guy is probably not unlike what Joseph Smith was like. People were believing him.
Probably not.
Totally believing him. And it's from the outside, it's like you've just done a slam dunk rather than saying, I confess the sins like most evangelical people that fall, so to speak, from grace. They confess it, don't they? They go to a sort of a little therapy, then they get back into ministry. He was going, I think I'll change the whole thing. God says we can have more than one wife. You know, and of course, then you go back to the patriarchs and go, well, Abraham did, and
that's all you got to do.
The patriarchs and Solomon, that's all you got to do. And it's like, what are you talking about? And so Mormonism officially had plural marriage until it was then taken away. The mainstream doesn't now have it. It's now the outflock that has it. But actually, they say we're the pristine truth. Brigham Young, Joseph Smith, all argued for plural marriage. So what are you doing saying it's now not of God? Because he got a revelation. And of course, when you get a revelation, how can you say you haven't? Right. If you believe them, you know. And so, I was immediately being affected by my own study of Joseph Smith, seeing this guy, and to be honest with you, no different, Derek, that when I see David Koresh thinking about the end times coming soon or whatever in that cultish movement, I see Jesus as thinking the end time is coming soon. It's all the same. They're all failed prophets. You know, and it's like we've just exempted Jesus from being a failed prophet, and all the other ones are throughout history. I just go one step further and say Jesus was as well, the historical Jesus, I mean, a failed prophet. Right. And I'm so, anyway.
Okay, got some super chats here.
I can't be here actually too much longer. I'm going to get a drink. And come back and listen. I can't be too much longer, though.
So then let's blast through these supers. Let's not. Yeah. All right, I'll start reading them. S. Mill in the house. He can hear me, by the way. Thank you so much for the super chat, S. Mill. This is like the Christian tradition in the Catholic. This is like the Christian tradition in the Catholic Church that is invented hundreds of years after the New Testament was written, and not even in the Bible. Talking about Jubilee, or this idea that the Zionist guy was arguing from, trying to make his case. I agree.
From Jubilee Channel, by the way.
Yeah. Isn't that ironic?
Ironically. Isn't that ironic, isn't it? Yeah.
But he doesn't say on. He doesn't say it. Yeah.
Yeah, but he'll say, "Oh, look, the show's called Jubilee. It's right there."
Wild.
It is ironic. It's really ironic, actually. Out of all the things, Jubilee. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Esmil. Steve in the house again. Steve, thank you. My point regarding the Jordanian flag was that Israel law forbids burning it, but in Jordan you can burn flag of Israel.
Ah,
well, I think we already dealt with that. I think you did know.
Yes,
that.
but I understood it differently than that. I thought it was
okay.
He's saying My point regarding the Jordanian flag was that Israeli law forbids burning it. Okay, so Israeli law forbids burning it. In Jordan, you can burn the Israel flag. Well, I don't know that is the case. It made me think of how there are within a democratic officially group, you can actually have laws that apply strictly to Jewish heritage and not to even Israeli Arabs, of which there's 2 million. And so I've seen distinctions in the law within the system, which is kind of almost like a not an apartheid in that sense, but more of a segregation, slightly lower class. Yeah. That's not even talking about the Palestinians in West Bank or Gaza. But yeah, so I was linking it to that. But this is interesting. I didn't know in Jordan you can burn an Israeli flag.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Steve, interesting. Wait a minute. What? Thank you for the super chat. Seems to me like the narrative, including Ham, father of Canaan, as the progenitor of Africans, excusing slavery to create hatred toward Canaanites. Let me see. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I know that this passage has been used by many during, especially the time that slavery was still legal. This was used to kind of sanction and say, hey, again, we're using the Bible, right, to justify modern views. They would say, hey, we've got biblical precedent. The people from Africa, Ham and his descendants, Canaanites, they were meant to be slaves. This is ordained by God. Like, they used it as a weapon against people who were actual slaves in history. I know that to be the case. If that's what, wait a minute, what was trying to get at.
Yeah. Sometimes I have to make sure I really read these carefully to know what's trying to be said. Yeah.
Yeah, but it could be simply that Canaanites were kind of meant to be, I don't know,
this has also made me think, what we didn't get into was the classic, regardless of all of this stuff we've been talking about, Shem and Ham and Japheth, even the biblical scholars don't really know what this curse was about. When they saw Noah naked, he got drunk, dragged him out, and then he curses Canaan and not the one that saw him. There's a bit of a mystery, and everyone's like, I don't know, you must have done something. You must have had someone on who's tried to explain, even like Joel Baden or something, say there's different takes on it, different ideas, but here's what I think. Have you had anything like that? Because I've never really understood it.
Well, there's mainly four competing views that I did a video on this. One that it seems to be the majority is that there's this kind of, he castrates his father, right? Which might come from an older kind of Uranos mythology. And even later rabbinic sources seem to hint at this interpretation as a plausible one. There's another competing tradition that some scholars have noted, where if you go to the law codes, you'll find it says that if a man sleeps with his father's wife, his mother or his mother-in-law, or not mother-in-law, but his stepmom or whatever. If he sleeps with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. It literally says that in the law codes. So some have thought, did he sleep with his dad's wife, his mom? Because it's not another
way
mom.
Of saying it.
Yeah, it's his actual mom, though, if that's the case. It doesn't say that, but there's some scholars who thought that. There's another one I can't remember. It's not as significant. And then there's another one that I think has potential that I thought maybe there's something to this shit. Because here's the thing. Noah's drunk, right? He drinks from the vine, he gets drunk. Yeah. There's an older
As Canaanite. You do when you follow God.
Yeah, exactly. The greatest of saints are the most
the
drunk.
Greatest of saints, exactly.
And he gets obviously twisted, he gets drunk on his own wine. In a Canaanite myth, they're El, the chief god, the father of heaven, if you will, the father of the 70 sons and whatnot. El gets drunk in a story. Have you heard about this? You ever heard of El getting drunk? Hold on. Let me get the source for you.
I have heard, by the way, just to interject here, I don't know if you've heard this, but I have heard defenses of Abraham getting drunk is that something changed in the, he's probably a young earth creation or something, but something changed after the flood and he didn't understand fermentation, the fermented grape. And so therefore he wasn't used to it. So he was like suddenly it did this thing to you. I mean, it's the most nonsense thing or whatever, but you can bet your bottom dollar it's not surprising someone tries to alleviate the righteous man, by the way, who God spotted amongst no one else, him and his family, put in the ark because of what? And he looked around and he goes, there was none righteous except everything is evil in the intent of their heart. But Noah was a righteous man. And then he gets drunk straight after he gets out the ark. And then, and then so somebody's going to have to defend that. And so the idea that fermentation for grapes started then, and he wasn't used to it, so he got drunk. That's I've actually heard someone say that. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable.
It is. It's any excuse, but it's an origin myth.
How can he be righteous? It's an origin myth, probably for the Canaanites, by the way. Yeah.
Let me read you what this ancient Canaanite myth from 1400 BCE, obviously from Garrett, Syria, says. El or Elu sacrifices game in his dwelling. He butchers the beast in the midst of his palace. He welcomes the gods and offers them fine cuts. The gods eat and drink. They fill themselves with wine, with new vintage until they are drunk. Yarek lies down like a dog. Like a dog, he crawls underneath the tables. The gods who know him give him fare to feast upon. But those who do not know him, they beat him with sticks beneath the table. He goes to Athart and Anat. That's Asherah, Astarte, however you want to pronounce it, and Anat. Astarte prepares him a steak, and Anat a rack of ribs. The porter of Elu's house rebukes them not to give steak to a dog, not to give ribs to a cur. He rebukes his father El too. El seats himself and convenes his group. El seats himself in his marziak or marzea. El fills himself with wine, with new vintage until he is drunk. El stumbles off to his house and staggers into his court. He is carried along by Thukamun Wa Shunam. Hubaya then berates him, the one with two horns and a tail. He slips in his excrement and urine. So he slips in his excrement and urine. El collapses like a dead man. El goes down like those who descend to the earth, meaning possibly the underworld. Astarte and Anat go off to hunt. Astarte and Anat return, and with them they bring back something for the healing. And as when one performs the healing, he awakes. On his brow one should put the hair of the dog, the head of a PQQ plant with its shoot, mixed together with virgin olive oil. So here's the thing. To spare you all of that, to give you the interpretation, is El gets shit-faced at a party after a sacrifice, which, by the way, Noah does a sacrifice, right? And then he gets blistered. He gets completely blistered, and his family, even when he was drunk, treated him with dignity. They didn't treat him like crap. His own family treated him well, even when he got plastered. And some have interpreted that the way that he was treated by one of his sons in this story is implying a complete disrespect to his father, even in his drunken state. When you have this older myth that a god gets drunk and, of course, his family treats him with kindness. So there's these floating hypotheses. No one knows for sure which one it is. But I think that one should be on the table or near it. There's also a story, and I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but there's a story in the Greek myth of the flood where the founder of wine is told after the flood, just like in Genesis. And it's a dog that buries a vine, and that vine ends up becoming a vineyard. So there's a dog in the story, but just like there's a dog in the story.
You know why that wouldn't surprise me? It wouldn't surprise me because you've got the snake and eternal life and immortality in Genesis, the serpent or whatever, or the snake, and then you've got the one in the Gilgamesh epic, with the serpent, the snake that comes along and steals the tree. It's so familiar territory. It would not surprise me that there's a wine myth going around, and it's all based on kind of like maybe a deliberate Jewish version or Hebrew version or whatever, or however archaic want to name the people then. But it wouldn't be surprising if they're just imbibing common stories for their own good, or literally making a play on it because people knew that. Another reason, by the way, when we talked about Abraham coming from Ur, I've read that, in fact, some of the stories that in order for the later writers to write stories, it would have come from the fact that Abraham wasn't native to Canaan or Shem or any of them. You know what I mean? It was because they lived and their family was so embedded in there that some. Have you ever heard that stories could have come through? That's if Abraham's a historical figure, but just for argument's sake, it doesn't have to come from later Babylonian exile. It could come from, the land. The Earl of the Chaldees, is it, or Chaldees? People say.
Yeah, depends on.
If your family is embedded in there historically, you're going to hit these stories of their culture, bring it with you, and maybe adapt it. Not you yourself, but as you tell them down the generations. It's assuming oral tradition. So many assumptions,
Exactly.
But still possible to think. Well, how would anybody? Somebody might say, how would anybody who was a descendant of Abraham possibly know about these ancient stories? Well, where do they come from? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Steve. We're trying to get through these for you. I know you got to go. Thank you again. Can someone explain why Palestinians moved to UK rather than an Islamic country like Pakistan or Indonesia? Does not make sense to me at all. Do you know?
Yeah, possibly. Or so I could say something on this because look, in England, we have a group of people that used to be called gypsies, now called travelers. Okay, and then they're split up into groups. There's Irish ones and ones from Europe, and these people who are in England from that sort of descendancy are kind of looked upon as very lowly people. They're not like secondary level people by some people in England, even now. Yeah. Oh, they're just travelers, or travelers is just the more correct name now. But if you are from that community, you're just seen as probably by some people just not important because you don't settle down. You're always traveling, I don't know if you have anything equivalent in the States like that, but because what I've read is that Palestinians themselves are kind of looked down upon by other countries and other Muslims. We don't want them. They're kind of a secondary level. So it's not like, oh, well, you're Muslim, they're Muslim, and they're not all Muslim. You've got Christian Palestinians. So, but the people that were there have kind of had their backs turned upon them by other countries, because most of them probably are Muslim, but they're not. It's like, oh, we're from here. Where are you from? From Palestine. Oh, right. I see. Okay. You know what I mean? This does go on in the world. Even in Turkey, you've got a certain section that are frowned upon by the other section because it's just not quite good enough from their supposed histories. I was talking to a Turkish friend not long ago about this, and I'm thinking that's really interesting. So sort of like a second class nature. So if the Palestinians have seen as second class by even other Muslim countries, it's like we don't want them either. And so there are people, and so therefore there is this thing of going to America or going to Europe or going to somewhere, which is the reverse, by the way, of the Jewish persecution and anti-Semitism. And in Europe, after the Holocaust, it was like, well, can you take them? Can you take them? They go, no, we turned them back on them. We don't want them. So I tell you what, give them half of Palestine, put them there. There was that attitude as well. It was like, we don't want them. And so that's part of true anti-Semitism, as opposed to opposing what Netanyahu's doing. That's a very different thing in my view. Very, very different thing. Although people try to conflate the both. If you criticize Netanyahu, you're totally anti-Semitic. I just don't think if you live in a world like that, then you're in trouble because of we can criticize everybody else with war decisions, but not this one nation, but that's very, very different from thinking Jewish blood is somehow secondary in the persecutions over history. So Palestinians are, in my view, and have been seen from my understanding so far in what I've read, as kind of secondary, and we don't want them. And so, when Trump was saying we need to get rid of the lot, let's put them into Jordan, let's put them here, let's put them there, there's still this idea that that it's a group that aren't quite us. Do you see what I mean? Because humans are tribalistic. So I would rate something like that. That's why, because otherwise it's the implication of the question could be, they could solve the problem by just taking all the Palestinians in, let Israel have the whole land, and make it as simple. Trump was trying to do that. He wasn't trying to say, come over to America and we'll make you a home. he was saying, let's just ask Jordan, let's ask, Lebanon and all these people to take them. A kind of a very subtle way of ethnic cleansing as well. I mean, it's like, okay, it would be the wrong side of history to go that way, I think. But yeah, so that would be my attempt at answering that question.
I have nothing to add. You would know more than I would on that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Victor, thank you for the super chat. Ball Cycle has an inherited land too, Memphis. Yes. I just went with the top few that came to mind, and I knew that we'd have some really popular ones, but you could probably find this extensively throughout all sorts of literature. And you could find elements of it. It may not check off all the boxes that you find within the biblical tell, but you will find it. You'll find elements of it all over that I didn't even touch on. Bakken, thank you for the super chat. Just a theory, but the goddess Asherah was worshipped in both Canaan, Kinahu, and Israel. The goddess Inanna had a sacred plant kin. It is subjugated, broken down. Nation narrative writes her out. True. And she probably extended to further areas than just, that. I mean, there's no telling how far this. I'd have to dig deep into Asherah and see how far she's obviously been spread throughout the world, because I imagine she's all over the place.
This is interesting, though, because the goddess Asherah was also found archaeologically wise to be linked to Yahweh. You've done a lot on this, haven't you? And that's kind of, I wonder what that guy in Jubilee would say about that. Possibly I'll say, well, that's Israel going off the track and worshipping gods. But actually, you could probably argue that this is part of the evidence that says we all came from the one. We didn't even worship Yahweh. We worshipped El, and probably El was one of many. And then you had the gods with the land. Matter of fact, talking about distributing the land, by the way, and you know a lot about this, probably more than I do, but I do know about it. It's argued in this particular crazy view that God was distributing the land to the three sons of Noah, but serious scholarship across the board does seem to accept that El was proportioning and assigning the land to various gods, one of which was Yahweh for the land, one of which was Chemosh, one of which that's my understanding anyway of it. So apportioning of the land is a later thing. One of which is Yahweh, and so it's not even monotheism and land, which this guy would just accept pure monotheism, wouldn't he? You could just tell.
Probably,
not. Oh, by the way, there is a view, and it's very strong in scholarship. I know it's split on this one, but I know I was first exposed to it 15 years ago with Tom Stark's book, if you've heard of him.
Yes.
And that was so brilliant book, but he made definitely the case that El was a junior. Sorry, not El. El was the god, and Yahweh was the junior, one of many, and that Yahweh eventually morphed and became the top dog and then merged into El. I mean, you know this. Other people disagree that actually the thing that persuaded me of that is that you don't give an inheritance, as Tom Stark was saying and others have said, you don't normally give an inheritance to yourself. You give it to your sons, classically, you inherit this, you inherit this, you inherit. And by the way, I'm just about, I'm the father and I'll inherit the Mercedes, the car. Right. You don't do that. So that's a strong view. But what I'm trying to do here to link it back is that the proportioning of the land is done in those kind of verses to do with gods and the land, not Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Right.
You have three sections of the land. I mean, you got the idea of 70. Is it 70 nations?
It's 70. Because, 70.
Yeah. Some say 72 in different manuscripts. But the idea of 70, it can't be, like there's this later thing that says it's according to the number of angels, and that could be myriads, or according to the number of Israelites. Well, there isn't as many angels as the Israelites are meant to be as the stars of heaven. That seems crazy. But 70 gods, that seems more reasonable in a storytelling way, doesn't it?
You have older ancient Near Eastern stories with 70 gods. This is like in the Canaanite one that I was just reading from, even older Hittite ones. There's all sorts of ones that talk about 70 gods. And in fact, in a Dead Sea Scroll, we have a manuscript from the Dead Sea Scrolls in a Septuagint translation. You literally have, it's the sons of gods, right? The 70 sons of gods that he allots the portions of the land to. But then in verse 43, there's a completely chopped out 6 verses And if you read the verses, you'll see why. It's a very rare, we only have one instance of it from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we don't have any tradition carrying this on because it's talking about the gods in the heavens, the gods, plural. There's got to be that's got to be the reason they didn't keep it. They had to have cut that out. So it does have an earlier memory of many gods.
Yeah. And just like so many other things, like the Sargon thing with the Moses basket, the flood, everything seems to be like the authors are in knowledge of all this stuff, and they're either plagiarizing just to have their own version, or they're combating to do a counter version. Either way, it's not just like the evangelicals said, because when I was an evangelical and fundamentalist, I was so shocked to find out the Noah story, the Gilgamesh epic. They were saying, don't freak out. That's just the fact that proves it all happened. That proves it all happened. The accurate version is the Bible, and the wrong version is their stories. But that's what I was told. The flood happened, and I was thinking, no. To me, it sounded like someone was copying an older story, you know. And I'm thinking that freaked me out when I first learned it. So why was I freaked out? Because it looked like plagiarism, or it looked like I didn't know this. And you mean it wasn't Noah? It was this other guy, and the ark was round. But what's going on? Chinese whispers and error, I was told, for those stories. Pristine truth much later through revelation to Moses. That's what I was told. You've heard this. Yeah.
Yes. Bakken, thank you so much for the super chat. A couple more here, and then I'll let you go. I do not know how to pronounce your name here, but thank you for the super chat. And it looks like they are in modern Israel today, based on the shekels there. The tree, after hosting the angels, I think one of the angels is the angel of the Lord himself, comes to the Hebrew Bible as Eshel Avraham, etymology from food, drinks, and sleep, or godly fire. That sounds like a later rabbinic kind of maybe etymology to try and explain. Not saying that it couldn't have some depth there. I saw a little bit of chit chat that you had in the comments that were talking about this. There's a book that I would highly recommend. It's I wish I could find it. Anyway, I won't waste my time. It's Robert Cargill's book, Bob Cargill.
Oh, he's great.
Cities That Built the Bible. And he talks about geography, but also you could talk about trees. When you start talking about trees, there's an interesting tree in the story in that episode. There's one in Genesis 21 that Abraham buries, plants a tree, but that's a different tree. There was some ancient tree that is sacred, like a sacred oak type or some kind of tree that is there in the story that plays a role. And you find that in other stories with this cataclysmic kind of apocalyptic thing that I was reading about with Philemon and Bacchus earlier. The tree motif that you see, the sacred tree. So there's a sacred tree associated with the myths. I don't have time today to get into all of that, but thank you so much for your super chat. I don't know Hebrew, so I don't pretend to know what the etymology to this is, but this sounds like something I've heard that rabbinic sources seem to try to suggest the meaning of it is. I could be wrong, but I think. J-Doc, thank you so much for the super chat. Church of Restoration, Greenville, Ohio, started in the 19th, early 20th century. Leadership claims to be apostles, and their words are scripture. Freaky.
That doesn't surprise me at all. So, not after watching that thing on Netflix. Yeah.
It is freaky because anyone, these people who carry this authority, who are using it, and they are definitely getting people are wanting things like this to be true. So there's a sense they feel special to be part of this unique thing, and they think they're chosen, or they think they're special. I've been there. I used to think I was a chosen son of God. I was special. God predestined me. I was unique. And there's something about that comes into the psychology of being duped into this cult. All those little girls that were on that FLDS show, they all felt they were unique, and they knew something no one else knew. And it's like on the outside, you look in and you're like, well, no.
You've got experience with this. I have talked to Calvinists, diehard Calvinists in the past, and there's an arrogance about being chosen. Okay. Now the chosenness, by the way, is lifted from the chosen people of Israel. Of course, it's then lifted to the church in this view. And not only are you chosen like a nation, but you're individually selected for salvation. in the Calvinists I've spoken to. Matter of fact, I dabbled with Calvinism very, very, very tiny. I was an open theist much longer, and then I was an Arminian in the middle. But you can see I was just going a different route. But I found an arrogance in Calvinism where it was like, we know something that the others don't in the world. I've been, even if you say I've been chosen, it's all by grace. It's nothing by me. There's no works. All that business. It's all by grace. The very fact that others have not been handpicked it can do something to you.
For sure.
I'm kind of the lucky one, and our churches, and so what was that experience like for you to be chosen?
The same
in that sense.
It was that it was like I was very judgy. I felt like I was. There's a superiority complex that comes to this theology, so that's why when people think, oh, I am coming from my experience. Okay, the ancient philosopher who once said, "Man is the measurement of all things." We've extrapolated that to mean something radically different than what he meant. And there's a there's a good book on Herodotus. You should listen to it on Audible. Listen to this wonderful scholar explain ancient Herodotus and what he was writing and why. She describes this philosopher and points out we've taken it to mean like the measurement of man is like we're the measurement of all things. Like we extrapolate calculations from our measurements or something. No, our experience is how we see the world and we project through the world. When you hear me be critical of fundamentalism, critical of Bible stuff, critical of this stuff didn't happen, or I'm trying to help people see the faults and flaws and problems, it's because of my experience with the very thing you're talking about and how I knew I believed. I remember how I thought about other people, how I thought about people who weren't believers like me. They were, like you described, these second-class citizens. They were less than.
Exactly.
They were not on my level. They were not as important as I am. I am a chosen son of God. Yes. You know what I mean? And like, dude, there's some shit that goes wrong with your thinking because when you believe that, and then if you have power, add power to that, oh, hell no. I didn't have power, but I could only imagine if someone like me had power and believed in nonsense at the same time, what kind of trouble I could get myself into, I could get others into. That's why I want people to just be themselves and to not need these things in order to find fulfillment. So anyway, I just gave
and how abuse can come out of that, because male headship theology. Yep. You could say that there's a servant form of it. Now, I was taught a sort of what I would say is a more healthy version of that. If you're the head of the house, you're kind of the servant of the house, and your wife is higher than you in one sense because you're serving. But actually, in history, it's not necessarily gone that way. It's gone with dominance and power. I've been made the head. I make the decisions, and in the end, you can end up being very abusive because of this. You're chosen to be that role. Your wife is chosen to obey. You know what I mean? We have it in the marriage vows, isn't it? Love, honor, and obey. And so we kind of balk at that today, but actually it's come historically. Women were property originally, weren't they? Just handed from the father to the son. So this can be seen now and throughout history as abuse. And so actually Calvinistic theology, I think, just felt to me a bit more abusive in where it could lead in your mind.
I agree.
Because of being so-called selected for salvation. As an Arminian, we were taught that chosenness was like the ship was chosen to go to a place, and that you can freely jump on board or off board. That's up to you, but not that you're selected to be on the ship. You know what I mean? That's how the Arminian would look at it. Chosen, and also chosen to be a blessing to others, not chosen because it gets to your head,
Yeah, it's
not
kind of funny
that you're special. Yeah.
The Calvinists would debate with the Arminian, and they would say, listen, I didn't choose this. Okay.
Yes.
God chose me. And the arrogance that comes with that is just blasting from their pores. You can smell the arrogance, but then the Arminian combats it back. Right. And they're like, no. I chose God. I chose Jesus, right? Yes. And it's like, so you're smarter than me? Like, you chose? So no matter what you do, there's arrogance that come out. Like, I was smart enough. to be convinced and follow the evidence, you idiots. If you don't believe like me, it's because I'm smarter. It's no matter what you do, man, you're screwed.
I spoke to a Calvinist, like a hyper Calvinist once, and somebody called Chris Date, if you've heard of him.
Yes.
And
yes.
yeah, and I spoke. I bet he's been on our podcast twice, and I said to him, so did God? He ordains meticulously everything. So I said, what, he ordained like our atheism and our podcast to be like where we are now in our beliefs? Yes, he would say. He has to say it, and it's like, so he ordained Arminians then to be part of the church is part of his foreseen plan. He ordained all the different alternate denominations, alternate views of the Bible. He ordained some to believe in women, like those two guys on the video that we did on the last show, going at each other. That God ordained the Calvinist and the Arminian, and it's just like I just thought, how can you have this mentality that God? So you're almost saying God wanted the diversity of the church,
right?
You know what I mean? This is what pushed me to open theism, even because I thought I can't work with a God that ordains everything meticulously. Because it doesn't work, because that means you planned for me to be first of all an Arminian, and then an open theist, and then an agnostic, and then a liberal or a progressive. And what if this is the plan that you've got for me? Because I'm the vessels of wrath, as the Calvinists would say. You were a vessel of what's the word in Romans?
It's a vessel of wrath prepared for destruction, or a vessel of glory. You know what I mean?
That would go to your head, because you would have believed that you were a vessel of glory.
Of course.
Yeah. And these other people are vessels of wrath.
I'm a special plate that's going on God's dinner table. You're a piece of crap plate that's going to be broken.
Even Arminian Christians, you mean?
Yes, even Arminian Christians. Yes. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, because you have to deal with the language there no matter what position you take. By the way, someone real quick, we got three more.
Church of Restoration.
Someone said this. It's like, really? Where? Like,
yes, exactly.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, what are you have you even watched the video? My gosh.
What I would like to put to a person like this, okay, who says this sort of thing, because you hear it and see it all the time. I would like to spin it around and say, can you just say in one sentence, what should people do? What should they be like? Because it would be interesting to see if someone like this would say, would it be the government of Israel can do no wrong? Right. There's nothing bad they can do. The government of Israel are atheists, but they're God's chosen people, and that he's loving the situation. Does he think Palestinians are secondary human beings? You know what I mean? So I'd love to hear someone like this, instead of just saying you've jumped on the anti-Semitic bandwagon. What is the worldview? Is it like, and I recognize true anti-Semitism. I've got friends who tried to collect food and money for the Palestinian plight in Gaza, with all the children getting killed, and people like this came on the thing and said this is all anti-Semitic, trying to get food to kids. Yeah, and so I mean, we can't help stepping on politics here, can we? But I can't see.
Look, every country has the right to conquer the planet. That's Darwinian. Israel is free to try. So this is enough. We don't even gotta listen no more. I just thought I'd laugh with you about that. Like
that, yeah. I mean, and that's fine. That's fine. If let me just run with that for a minute. Let Israel try, but let Israel try without America giving them 40 billion a year. Yeah, 4 billion a year.
A ton of money.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's really American backing, and so they wouldn't be where they are without American support. And so it's really let America try. I mean, I find this so interesting, because I grew up absolutely pro-Israel in all the political sense, but it never was a distinction for me to think of Jewish people down the road, or friends of mine who are Jewish, thinking that they had anything to do whatsoever personally with what the government does. You know what I mean? It's just a different thing. It's like in England, we've got a vote coming up with Reform and Green Party and these other parties, and I would be so opposed to Reform in England, this particular party, because of their right-wing extremism and all the rest of it. But if somebody said, well, you're just anti-British, because I'm not going to vote for this group. I'm going to vote for this other group. I would be appalled at that. And say, you're just jumping on the anti-British bandwagon because I'm voting this political party. And in Israel, if people vote against the Likud party, that is democracy. That's not anti-Semitic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just don't understand people. And people like that just do a quote. They don't explain themselves.
Well, they did. They followed up with some nonsense. So I'm just going to.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. William Arns, thank you for the super chat. There are great differences between Christian sects who believe that they have replaced Israel as the chosen people, and those that believe that a Jewish Zionist state is a requirement for the return of Christ. Yeah, of course, no
massively.
doubt.
Yeah, I went from one to the other. Christian sects, and not only that, the Christian sects that believe that the church has replaced Israel isn't what those Christian sects actually say. That's the accusation. Okay, because a replacement theology is, most of these people don't agree. We never agreed with that. When I was, it was like Christians who believe in Jesus, whether Jew or Gentile, became the people of God, and it all started off with lots of Jews believing in Jesus, and so it was the true Jew was the believer in Jesus, because the early church was purely Jewish. So that's what I thought. So people in that view don't call it replacement. We don't replace Israel. It's just that the real Israel are the ones who follow God. And in the new covenant and the New Testament, it's the ones that follow Jesus.
Of course.
And so therefore, the rest are being asked to come in, and that includes general Jewish people who haven't accepted Jesus as the Messiah, but hopefully will, encouraging to come in, and all Gentiles who don't believe in Jesus to come in. So the olive branch was one thing, not a replacement of the one thing. That's how we understood it.
Right.
But when I was before that, I was just taught that there's two, like, not covenants, but two, there's the original train of Israel and Jewish people and Judaism, and eventually they'll accept the Messiah, but they have a different trajectory than Gentiles. So you've got the church and Israel as distinct things. So, but I never believed that the church replaced Israel. It was that the whole point was that the people of God, follow the covenant at the time. And you could say there was a new covenant, so as a Christian, yeah. So, but anyway, it's a very good distinct question there anyway. Yeah,
I agree. Bakken, thank you so much for the super chat. PPQ plant green fruit oil, canna cures hangovers. I didn't know that cannabis, is it cannabis? I think that's what they're getting at, Bakken. If you're still in the chat, help me out. Cannabis cures hangovers. If that's the case, I could have used it many times.
Yeah, but maybe Noah could have used this if he'd known.
If he'd have known, he'd have been just, all right, guys, we're good. Seriously,
and then we wouldn't have had the whole Cain curse and everything. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Victor, thank you so much for the super chat. Moses' family had 70 members. There's a lot of this. If you go to the Elijah Elisha story, you're going to find 70. Yeah. Jesus and Luke sends out, I think it's 2 pairs, so it ends up 72. But you do get the 70 motif, and then it's all over the Bible. There's a lot of 70, but that's
just like 40 is exactly. 7 is 3 is. They're all. You begin to wonder. Somebody asked me once, was there actually 12 disciples? Because 12 is so figuratively strong.
Right.
Was it just a catch-all? There might have been 15. Exactly. Because 12 is replicating the 12 tribes of Israel. Was there really 12 tribes of Israel? Is that not a trope in itself to have 12?
Bingo.
You know all about this. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, you're right. You're right on the money. Yeah. William Arns again, last super chat, and then we're going to wrap things up. It's late for you, and I've got to go to the restroom. A church can develop an apostolic hierarchy without that leadership becoming agorant or
arrogant.
Okay, arrogant.
It probably means arrogant. Yeah.
Okay. Arrogant or abusive. A church can also outgrow such errors in judgment. True.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's true.
The thing is, the church is so diverse. When everybody says Christians or the church, you have to say what Christian, what type, what church, even what Bible, the Catholic one, Coptic church one. And then what interpretation of the Bible? Are you more literalist, more metaphorical? I mean, it's just like, where do you want me to start with the diversity? It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and I've met many people who are in the church that are part of different religions that are amazing. So it just depends. But when people are easily gullible in following these kinds of paths, and they have been well worn and carved paths, you got to be very careful. My radar spidey senses go off even more when they're a holy man. You know what I mean?
The biggest advice would be the danger in a one man or one person charismatic figure. That's the danger, because you've seen it over and over again in history, including this century, last century, all the centuries. If you get a charismatic figure who's very dominant, then you get followers who follow you, and that can lead into power. Whereas if you had a structure that had accountability and not one leader, and there are Christian movements, by the way, that operate without one major figure, so that may help the idea of I think the Brethren Church, certainly in England, you can't have one person leading. You have to have a team, and the team are all accountable to each other. These things would be a safer bet even in business, because once you have one figure, dictatorship can happen. You know, some people accuse Trump of moving to becoming a dictator, really. The no kings thing, dictatorship. And, somebody who says, well, let's get rid of voting, then you're well on the way. No accountability. I can do what I want. It goes to your head, and you could be like Putin, who is seen to be a dictator. So, sure. It happens in the church in many ways. I've seen it happen. I've seen dominant people abuse people with a single charismatic leader.
Absolutely. And then Victor Engelman says, and thank you, Victor, 40 is the holy number of Inky.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, we're going to be covering a show. This is coming up. Me and Victor are going to be doing in a week's time. We're going to talk about the Exodus story and paralleling it to older Mesopotamian stories. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of parallels he finds in comparing them. So anyway, shameless
40
plug.
Is one.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Look, Christian Diversity YouTube channel. In the description, you could check out his podcast. A link is there.
Yeah, Doubts Allowed. Doubts Allowed is the podcast. I don't know if you can show it there. But
let me see if I can.
Doubts Allowed, the Christian Diversity, just to say, was something I did 10 years ago, and I did 14 subjects, just as we showed in the last episode we did. 14 subjects of Christians disagreeing with each other, with me as a host. This podcast is a sort of a counter-apologetics podcast. It covers probably so much of the stuff that, Derek, you have in your shows in many ways. Right. It's touched into all kinds of things, to do with not just evangelical Christianity. We've had Muslim apologists on. We've had deconversion story from someone from Islam to atheism, and studies on Mormonism or the gods of the Old Testament, henotheism, so many different subjects, homosexuality in the church, as a view of acceptability in the church against those against it, and all kinds of. So we touch into so many areas in 100 podcasts nearly, and over the last 10 years, by the way, 8 years. And this is current, so we do it every month. I've got an edit to do fairly soon to get the 99th episode up, and that is going to be on C.S. Lewis trilemma, but it's not the trilemma, because it's actually a third L, which is legend, and we unpack the whole thing to do with legend, and that's not necessarily at all to do with the legend of Jesus didn't exist, mythicism. It's to do with a figure that's had legendary stuff piled on top, and the Gospel of John and all of that piling on top of him, that you can't. It's so hard now to get to the real figure that, to all intents and purposes, you can almost say that the mythical Jesus has become the Jesus, and the mythical Jesus is a myth, even if there was a historical figure. You know what I mean? I mean, you've done this over and over. I am definitely a historicist, but I think that. So basically, we went into C.S. Lewis trilemma, so it doesn't work because of the legend potential.
Yeah. Did you see
so,
the Wes Huff actually said legend doesn't work, and he said that on a Sean Ryan episode.
Oh, he said legend doesn't work.
Yeah, go look it up. The one Sean Ryan show, the main one. If you go and go to on YouTube, it lets you find the transcript. Command F on my computer, on my Mac. but you can search the word and then look up, just look up C.S. Lewis or trilemma. And then he mentions legend and passes it. He just legend, it can't be legend, boom, and then moves on. Like he
probably
does
to say
not
because
even.
it was all so close, yeah. And yet legends, you know, you've had people on your show to show that legends can come up even when people are alive, you know, before you know it. I mean, look, I mean, even if you just look at the modern news, I mean, even the latest shooting attempt on Trump, already off the bat the next day, it's a conspiracy and staged, you know. And so, you know, and suddenly this is what really happened. The day after,
imagine someone writing 40, 30 years later.
That's right. It's unbelievable.
And people willing to die for the story that they're.
It would. Some people would be willing to die for some of this stuff. And just occasionally, some of these conspiracies happen to hit on something that might be going on, the Epstein stuff, you know. But then generally, you know, but my feeling is that people right off the bat can be having stories about them that aren't true. I mean, have you ever talked and like said something and then you realize, I've always do this with my friends who are sort of Christian, and I say, I can't, what did you say just a minute ago? And I said, you know, I really can't remember. I wouldn't make a good gospel writer, put it that way, because I can't even remember what I said 5 minutes ago as a quote. And if I hear myself back on tape, if it was recorded just by chance or whatever, I'd go, God, that's not how I told my friend. I said this. And I actually go back and I didn't say that at all. And it's like, wow. And I'm more convinced that I said this than what I actually heard I said. It's incredible. Within an hour, you know. Yeah,
you don't even realize it. Yeah.
You don't even realize that you've rephrased it in a way that someone might interpret you differently than what you said. And it's like, I can't believe that. So why would I be a gospel writer? And you know what the answer is from an evangelical? Because God's writing through you. Yeah. You know. And so he's bringing it to memory, Holy Spirit. And so therefore you're like an automatic writer in the end, even though they don't like to say that, by the way. They want to put the human in there somewhere, but actually it's ultimately a bit like automatic writing, isn't it?
Yep.
And so because if it we know the human errors of the mind, it just doesn't work. And so, you know, but anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, I hope everybody goes and checks you out on the podcast and the YouTube. And of course, like this video, share it out there. You know, comment down below when the live stream's over. If you're watching this later, help support us. Go sign up for one of our MVP-courses.com, MVP-courses.com scholarly courses that we have. My wife works on all that. The Queen of Myth Vision, Ryan. She works very hard to get you scholarly lectures and courses and stuff. So go get you a course. There's several on there. I think we've got at least 12 to 15 scholar PhDs with courses that you can go sign up for, and also join our Patreon, become part of the family, or become a YouTube member. These are ways to help us out. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, never forget, we are Myth Vision.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.